Hello, everyone. We got a program for you. This episode of Effluvium, I will be joined by my friend Chris, and you may know him, most likely know him from his YouTube channel, Scentland, the Land of Scent. And he and I are going to go through the decades. We're going to share favorite fragrances from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. So, as you can imagine, this is a near impossible feat for me. I've narrowed it down to five favorites, but they're not my top five from each of those decades because, they're like children to me. I can't rank them. But five favorites from each of the decades, and I'm going to allow Chris to share as many or as little from each decade as he wishes. So we're going to take a look at the chat here because I do see that one of them came through. We have Will Mullen, a friend of the channel. Thank you for being here during our live transmission of Effluvium. And anybody else who is currently tuned in, don't be shy. Say hello. Share your scent of the day, whether that's morning, afternoon, evening, or night. And we'd love to hear what you're wearing. And I'm also looking forward to hearing some of the favorites that all of you have from each of these respective decades. So we're going to get this conversation started. Chris is backstage, and I will keep him waiting no longer. Let's get started and have a conversation. Hello.
Hello there, it's Scentland, the land of scent. Hello,
It's
how's things? Thanks for having me. First of
Of
all,
course. I was always willing to have you back, and I'm glad that you accepted my invitation back for what is the last effluvium of the season for YouTube. Because
wow.
it's the last one. I decided the third one would be the last one for this platform. I'm going to be moving it over to Substack. So the next time I talk
Oh,
with you, it will probably be more of a podcast format.
wow, that's cool. That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. But I'm
Yeah,
glad that
it's
you
fairly trendy, isn't it?
It's the trendy thing, yeah. But also, it gives me an opportunity as well to interview people who don't want to show their face. So it's like,
Okay.
you know how it is. So yeah, it's gotten to be trendy. Substack, but as I was telling you before we went live the other day, that this has been the one-on-one season, and this has been great because it gives me an opportunity to have a richer discussion with a guest, and there's not this big panel with all these different people competing. So this should be
Oh
really
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
fun.
yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
All right, let's see here. We have another chat. We have a paradigm sniff. We're in Liane from Italie d'Orange. That is a wonderful, powerful incense
Oh yeah.
aldehyde scent. Very nice. Very nice. All right. 8 people who are tuned in. I think, Chris, we're just going to allow a few more people to tune
Sure, sure,
in
sure.
to the live transmission of Effluvium. And just want to remind folks that I do have Buy Me a Coffee per usual. And I do have surplus in my collection, and I want to spread love. 12 cups equals 4-bottle grab bag. That is a grab bag. You can't request what it's going to be or what, but it's fun, and I haven't gotten any complaints yet. That's a 4-bottle grab bag plus a sample pack. If you purchase 12 cups from Buy Me a Coffee, 6 cups will get you a sample pack from my enormous collection of samples, many which are duplicates. It makes no sense for me to have 5 samples of the same fragrance. I want to send them to others. So that's US only, please, at this time. That's just shipping's really tough outside of the US. So that is at buymeacoffee.com/Joseph Cole P. And also, folks, don't forget to hit the like. It helps to get people to see this content. It works the algorithm. I have noticed the more likes I get on a certain video or a certain live stream, the more likely people run into it at random. So it's a great way of getting attention to this channel, sending people to this channel. Hi, Pat. Hello. Great to have you here. I have 8 people tuned in. And good afternoon, all, from Tom. Scent of the day, Bruno Acampora Musk EDP. Very nice. Thank you. I have that as well, and I find that to be lovely. All right. So
Where
I
are
think
you
we should.
based in the U.S.? Which part of the U.S. are you?
I'm in New England,
Oh,
Massachusetts.
wow, that's nice.
So
Not
it's the
far from
closest. Yeah, it's the closest thing to Europe as you can get, basically, in the 48
Boston.
contiguous states, as far as, especially Northern Europe, not necessarily Mediterranean Europe. It feels very much like Northern Europe or the UK here. So,
Cool.
yeah, it is frigid here. We have ice everywhere. The temperature, I think, is
But you don't mean the
24
border
degrees.
patrol, no? Not that type of ice.
No, no, not as no, no. We don't have much of that going on here.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a little bit of it is going on in Boston, but yeah. Getting controversial there, Chris.
Wow.
Open up a dialogue that people weren't
Wow.
expecting. All right, Tom, thank you. 9 people tuned in. I think since we're covering so many decades, we're not going to hesitate any longer. Why don't we get this started? And as always, I want to lead with the guest and have you share. We'll do back and forth. I'll have you start with a favorite of yours from the 1970s.
Yeah, exactly. So what I did is, and again, I totally agree with these are little children of ours, right? So you can't really put a real preference and say this is my favorite because
Right.
then tomorrow maybe another one, right? So I was trying to have actually one that is standing out the most, and then a little bit of a backup to that. So I'm going to like sort of going by the decade like this, and well, from the 70s is a fragrance that comes back always into the rotation. It's a very obvious choice. And as you will see actually throughout the selection, it features everything. It features from designer, I have niche, I have celebrity in here, even drugstore fragrance. So I was trying to keep it versatile as usual for Scentland. And but the first one is an obvious choice from the 70s. I mean, it's probably the best bouquet, and it always returns every year around this time actually at Zagopurom, right?
Nice.
And I just love the Annecy, the barbershoppy fougere stuff in here that is actually so well done, and it's sort of timeless. And I've interestingly, the small bottle that is around these days, the 50 ml, is very close to the one that I first smelled this back in 1993, so over like 30 years ago, right? 32 at this point,
Right, right.
closest to that. Okay, I'm not saying that I smelt it in '78 because I was like 6 years old. Okay, but this is somehow, and I get compliments weirdly from people saying, "Wow, this smells nice." So still, it has something. But if you want a less obvious choice from the '70s, it has to be this one. It's called Gainsborough
Gainsborough.
G-Man, right?
Mhm.
And this is from 1971. I wasn't even born yet when this came out. It's now distributed and made by Juvena, which is a company in Switzerland. And this is still around mostly in the German-speaking countries. So I would say Germany, Austria, Switzerland. It's around there, and it's a very, very nice herbal soap scent.
Hmm.
It's dark and fresh at the same time. You would imagine probably, I don't know, one or the other James Bond smelling this one, or John Wick, right? Um, and so this is the secret choice, I would say, from that decade, because it's just so good. It displays the soapy theme, this clean soapy herbal theme, to me the best, and it has a tremendous performance. I mean, it's just lingering. It's not as aggressive as most of the 70s perfumes or fragrances were. This is just so good. It's 100 mil, costs you nothing. Drugstore fragrance, right? You can get it in, like, I don't know, maybe like $20 or something for 100 mil. Unbelievable. And it's pure an artwork class, and nobody's wearing this. I mean, you will smell like nobody else, right? So this is the individual choice, and this is the mass pleaser, right? So these are dancing around and doing the disco of the 70s, or the punk rock, or whatever you want to have in the 70s, right?
Or even punk dance, even punk disco, a fusion. They
Yeah,
even would have a fusion between the two at the time.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
tell us, Chris, Gainsborough is tough to find here in North America. Are there any retailers online that might be able to ship Gainsborough over here? Because we don't find them we don't find it in drugstores here, but we know it's in abundance there.
Maybe, but I'm not an expert, and I usually on my channel I don't even go much into pricing and availability, because where I'm sitting, I'm looking at a certain segment of a market, and I don't know actually what the story is in relation to other continents, right?
Right,
Even
right.
the UK now and the US, it's different. It's difficult. It's difficult to ship, and the taxes and all that. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how the availability is, but it's in production and it's available. So if on eBay, then on eBay, and if not, then some other maybe Enchanté up in Toronto
Yeah.
does it, for
Yeah,
example,
Anoush might
because
have
they're very
some.
good.
Or, just do a little investigating online and see if somebody is selling it and is able to ship to the US or Canada at a reasonable rate. But those are some good choices. I'm familiar with both, and I really
Wow.
love Azzaro Porom. So very nice, very nice. I guess what I could do is I could get started with my first one here, which will be, there had to be one from Hermes, and it is Equipage.
Oh yeah. Oh, and the original bottle. Wow.
Yes, very nice. The very nice, the shoulder bottle.
Beautiful.
Yes, very nice. Um, and this is a Guy Robert composition,
Oh
if
yeah,
my memory serves me well. And I'm
that's
quite a
correct.
fan of his approach to his compositions, because he works with nuance and aromatics in a way that, in spite of the nuance, can sort of surprise you throughout its development. And what I think is beautiful about Equipage, it's eminently classy. It is,
Yeah.
it was one of the last of those great refined, not that what was to come after wasn't refined, but that kind of refined, nuanced men's scent in the early 70s, where you have the rosewood and the carnation, and you have these different elements that create more of an aura rather than a commanding presence. And I think
Right.
it is just
Exactly.
a beautiful, beautiful composition. I have long been a fan of it, even long before I actually obtained a bottle of my own. There was this place that I've mentioned a number of times before, which is called Colonial Drug, which used to be in Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's since moved to another location. When I used to go to the location in Harvard Square, this was one of the prominent classics that they would feature as for sale. And I was just absolutely smitten with it. Would go in, ask for a sample, go in a few months later, they'd forget that I'd say, I would just keep doing this when I was younger. And then finally I would start getting bottles of it. So wonderful one, Equipage. Anybody who's tuned in, a fan of any of the three that we've mentioned so far, let us know. We're going to take a quick look at the chat, and then I want to have you take the floor again. So let's take a look at the chat very quickly. We have UK saying, "Wow, two best in one stream, fantastic! Thank you, gentlemen. I am humbled. I am honored. Thank you so much." JD, greetings sent to the day, Aramis 900. You'll be happy to know that a very close sibling is going to be featured very soon. So that's pretty much giving it away. But that was in the running, though, because I love both the sibling and Aramis 900. Sent to the day, Hermenildo Zenia, Peruvian Ambret, Ricardo Naves. Good evening from Portugal. How is it going, JJ and guests? It is going fantastic. Much peace and love to all of you. Fernando, lovely to see you as well. Glad that you have an opportunity to listen. And Scott, aloha back to you. And Ricardo returns saying that he had heard that Excellence smells like vanilla and sugar this year. Good times ahead. Isn't that just sheer excitement? Oof. I'm just so envious. JJ Colburn and Scentline, top level. Thank you. Thank you, Paradigm Sniff. I wish Edmonton, Alberta had a colonial drug. Maybe there's something in Alberta, some old drugstore selling fragrances, and you just have not discovered it yet. Keep on looking. Maybe there's something in Saskatchewan or Manitoba next door in one of the other provinces. All right, Chris, let's have you share your next one.
Alberta. Remember that? Yeah.
Okay, I sure do. Those prairie provinces.
Oh yeah, yeah. So well, just every like these fragrances are sort of fingerprints of the decade, right? So the 70s were kind of eclectic, right? We touched a little bit on music and fashion and the design in general, interior design. I mean, even furniture and everything looked kind of out of place, but still somehow very at this point very iconic. And so I think the fragrances are somehow a little bit of a fingerprint of, because they're fashion items no as well. So
Yes, exactly.
and maybe Equipage was bringing a little bit, actually a lot of the class of the 60s back over still to that much more dirtier sort of decade that we had in the 70s indeed. So I'm 72, so I mean born 72, not
I don't
70
have
years old, but I'm keeping well. um
78 here, Gen X.
well, there you go. So both children of that X generation there, exactly, and the 70s, and yeah, in the 80s were sort of everything was becoming much more easy digestible and much more commercial, probably in terms of, I don't know, music, for example,
Right.
and but it became probably even more sort of poppy and colorful. Although I find, I don't know if you agree, that somehow the fragrances were still sticking to what started in the 70s. The heavy leather, the patchouli,
Oh, for sure.
the
Yeah.
soapiness and all that stuff was still very much throughout the 80s maintaining itself.
Right,
Um,
right. You could totally do sort of a diagram or a chart of where you see these overlaps between older trends and newer trends and how they cross over and how they eventually slip away and the new ones kind of come in as you
yeah,
look at each decade. And for sure,
yeah.
you notice that from the beginning of a decade to the end, how
When do
certain
you
one,
think that happened in the 80s? When do you think that overlapping? Because I totally agree.
oh God, from 80 to 84, definitely. 80 to
Hmm.
84. I mean, it was never, of course, we know there's no like hard line, like one day, 1 month they just, but you see, that the shifts were starting in kind of like the mid 80s, and he started to get different trends coming. And then that also corresponds with the experimentation of different types of materials to create more modern ideas of a leather or more modern ideas of a fougere. And then you see things like in the middle of 1985 where you had things like what is the Creed one?
Green Irish Street.
Green Irish Tweed. Thank you. I had the color on the tip of my tongue, which would be a precursor to what we would see very much in the late 80s into the early 90s, etc. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah, it's definitely like it's sort of like gradations, and things kind of like fall out of favor or they blend with new things. And then it's sort of like you have to do charts where they overlap and one goes down, the other one kind of goes up. Yeah, it's cool stuff.
Yeah, so stepping into the 80s, there is the first creation, I think, from Monsieur Thierry Vasser, released in 1987, which was a great year, at least for me. And this is for the house of Salvador Dali. Salvador Dali
Yeah.
Prom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a mossy, very much patchouli heavy, still very heavy. It could have been released in 1977. It's like 10 years earlier.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
the reason I like it is that among all these heavy hitters of the 80s, this has somehow a bouquet, a DNA that very, very strongly reminds me of the favorite city of mine, which is Paris. It has something. It has such a French, despite being made for Salvador Dali, right? Although I think the brand was or still is based in France. But correct me if I'm wrong. But somehow this reminds me of Paris in the 70s, 80s, where it was a classy time with all these people around. Yves Saint Laurent, Karl Lagerfeld doing the parties every other week. And it has this somehow. A dirty fragrance, because it really smells earthy, dirty, and heavy and mossy, yet innocent at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. It's like a walk in the Père Lachaise cemetery. Actually, it's very weird because it's dark and fresh at the same time. So Thierry Vasser has done a great job, and the counterpart will be another 80s beauty, Sport de Paco Rabanne, right? Back from a time when sport flankers of originals were not as common as today. This was released, I think, in '86. It was, and it's a wonderful citrusy. There's a bit of petitgrain in there, a bit of woodiness, and it reminds me. It's like '80s springtime bottled. So I always grab
Mm.
this around March and April because it doesn't remind you at all of the original, but it's such
Right.
a positive great smelling green, um, citrusy, nice fragrance that it's like springtime bottle in the 80s. So
Mm.
it's I'm emotionally attached to all of these scents, and this is why I've chosen them mostly. So that's the case with Sport de Paco Rabanne. Unfortunately, discontinued. I wish I would see this still around. This one, I think, it's still widely available though.
Yeah, I think that it is. Some would argue there are differences with it, but your mileage may vary, is what I always say. I have an older version of it, and I never experienced a newer version, so I can't really speak from experience. But I think that with Salvador Dali Porom, it is that heliotrope that gives it that kind of soft, kind of innocence, that almondy, soft innocence that contrasts with the not so innocent carnal base. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's very interesting. I love it. Um, and I think that Paco Rabanne, as far as a sport fragrance from the 80s, is perhaps my favorite of the sport fragrances. I mean, there are a lot of great ones, but that one is the
yeah.
standout for me, for sure. So, how do you think we should do this? We're already moving to the 80s. Do you want to like circle around the decades and then keep doing that? Like go back to, because now we're into the 80s. How do you want to do this? Because,
We can talk a little about it about the we can put the fragrances into context even I
yeah.
mean like like as I said, for me, the 80s were sort of very obviously very nostalgic, and depends also how you grow up and where you grow up, what your childhood is like, what your early adolescence is like. I mean, for me, it was interesting because I moved in the middle of the 80s. I moved from the Western Bloc, which is West Germany at the time,
Mm-hmm.
right, where I grew up and when I was born, grew up, went to school, and then because of family happening, I moved to the other side of the Iron Curtain into Budapest,
Mm.
where I'm actually sitting now. And so I experienced both sides, and I remember that everything was in the 80s. Everything was black and white. Like that was the not only politically, but somehow in the way that things went about, in politics and in many other directions. Somehow it was clearer, not so many gray areas, and more definitely more fun, and much more innocent, and the information was not as flowing
Yeah. Yeah.
as quickly as it is, and it was extremely colorful. I mean, the 80s music is like wow. I mean, like every second week I get this on Facebook. I'm on these groups that are gallivanting through all these top 100, top 10 songs of I don't know week 27 of 1986, and you see all these songs. I
Oh
mean, like,
yeah. My
wow, my
yeah, my
God.
favorite is if they go right through like what was on the pop chart and you get to hear these songs you haven't heard in years.
Yeah,
And it's like,
exactly.
oh, it's so great to hear this song because music, much like scent, it can take you right back to a certain time and place and how you felt the last time you heard a certain song. So I love those kinds of
So
playlists.
why don't we say this? Okay, we have these favorite the fragrances from the 80s, 70s, 80s. What's your favorite song or musical direction or band of the 70s? Let's say that's an
Oh, from the
interesting one.
70s. God.
Yeah, because we forgot that decade to mention, but now we
Yeah,
can get
yeah.
context.
What I loved about the 70s is that there was not only was there's a lot more lyrically driven songs in pop music, but also there was a lot of experimentation, and that experimentation might have been a bit jarring to the older folks, but I love the things that were happening from everyone from Kraftwerk to Stevie Wonder, incorporating more modern synthetic elements to accent or to drive the whole composition with them. And that's why some of my favorite musicians from the 70s happen to be artists like Kraftwerk or Tangerine Dream, Brian Eno.
Yeah.
That said, though, I love a lot of the pop music too. I love those bands like America and Bread. Um, there's a lot of krautrock. I love Neu and Faust and
Wow.
yeah, a lot of crazy stuff. Like yeah, it really runs the gamut. I mean, there was just the zeitgeist was all about breaking tradition and breaking convention, and I think it was such an exciting time for music. And then that just persisted through the 80s. You think about it, like for all of the poppiness of all this music, like there were breaking a lot of conventions, and
Yes.
we're just
Yeah.
not seeing that quite the same way in the mainstream level. So yeah, yeah. I mean, as far as like, if we're circling back to fragrance, I don't know if you, so you obviously read my reviews sometimes. I often do references to the music of the time and
Sure,
imagining
sure, yeah.
somebody like listening to a certain type of music or even watching a certain movie or TV program. And I have this one. We're going to go back to the 70s, I guess. Givenchy Gentleman,
Oh yeah.
which to me is this great crossroads. This is kind of like that crossroads sort of fragrance. Remember, we were talking between what was happening in the 60s and what was coming towards the late 70s, because this experimentation with patchouli and ramping up the civet to create sort of a more sensuous feel, but you still had it firmly planted in the classic aromatic trend. So
Yeah.
it was like a definitely a junction between the two. And I think it's just what has one of the most beautiful openings. And with the music that I think of is sort of like, I don't know, that AM Gold kind of music. I hear like Gordon Lightfoot or BJ Thomas, or I don't know. It's that kind of music that you would hear on on an AM radio in the
Yeah.
70s, when I smell this. So yeah.
Well, that's a stunner. Yeah, it's a heavy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so nice.
Wow.
And then, like, if we move further, I'll just finish off some of the 70s ones so we can get right into the 80s if you want. Um, I'll take these here. This is what you were talking about. Well, actually, I'll save that for a second. The other two, but this is the cousin of Aramis 900. This
Wow.
is this is its older sibling, not by very much, by 2 years. Aromatics Elixir, because Bernard, his template for
Yeah.
Aramis 900 was actually Aromatics Elixir. They're not the same fragrance though, but they're very similar in their feel. And this is it gives me a similar feel to that of Givenchy Gentleman, just
Wow.
like earth tones and I imagine sort of like with sunlight going through reeds, at sunset, like on a marsh
Yeah.
or something. Yeah, so there's that, and then we move into the late 70s. We see this experimentation where you have like a crossroads between this earthy green movement and fragrance and the muskiness and leather driven and more sort of carnal stuff, when we had things like Aramis Devon and Yatagan coming in.
Yeah.
So then you see even more of a progression. So these are definitely two favorites from that time
I have
period as
that
well.
Tevin as well, 77. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah, yeah.
but
With Pat.
they smell like today they smell most of them. And this is why I actually applaud Azzaro program that much, because it manages to smell still contemporary. While let's say a Devon, um, that's a difficult one to wear on an everyday basis
Right, right.
in
This would be
this type of politically correct environment that we happen to have the tremendous opportunity to live in. So
right.
more of
Politically
the
correct as
backbone.
in like, God forbid you smell like you are human and not, antiseptic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
that you
Or bubble gum.
a bubble gum, yeah. And that's the thing. Something like this, you would have to get from a more non-mainstream niche or artisan sort of line, and a
Yeah,
lot of them try to accomplish this, but it's not easy for the self-taught artisan perfumer. There's some exceptions though, like Marc Antoine Corticchiato
Corticchiato. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with
It's
his
great.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh my god, beautiful. it, it
Yeah,
it smells like it could have come from this time period. And Roque, another one that Christopher Sheldrake did for Roberto Greco. So there's a few of them out there, but you're absolutely right, they're not mainstream today.
no, no, no.
Beautiful.
And the way you appreciate them is also different. Like again, I knew Azzaro Pugrom when I was like 21.
Right.
But I think you have to. in order for these fragrances to be able to become part of your aura, part of your personality, you have to have reached a certain maturity, a certain age, a certain life experience in order for you to be experienced the way it should be experienced, and for the fragrance to fit your personality as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
cannot just this is why I hate it when and here is where I politically become incorrect, when I
This
hate
is a
all
safe space for it.
these hoodie guys wearing Aventus, these days. I mean, you can, yeah, it's running around in a tracksuit and a gold chains and a reeking of Aventus, and I just can't stand it because the two things don't go together.
Cognitive dissonance.
It's breaking my whatever. So it's
No, yeah, it doesn't seem to match. I'm gonna look at the chat very quickly just to catch up with some folks here. Christy, it's wonderful to have you tuned in. Scent of the day, Shalimar. Beauty of scent to me and to you. Have y'all smelled any Loewe perfume? You bet I have. I actually have one next to me, and maybe Chris has one as well. Noah, great to have you here. Noah was our guest last week for a wonderful chat. Paradigm sniff. I'm guessing the early 80s were a remaining essence of the 70s hangover in fragrance and even fashion. To a degree, there were a lot of people who were moving on from things like butterfly collars and bell bottoms, though, I'll tell you. Because the 80s was all about let's get into our straight leg jeans and our comfortable casuals and
shoulder
stuff.
pads.
So shoulder pads were starting to come into vogue. More color, less muted, much more saturated. Sport de Paco Rabanne's opening is so good, I agree. Favorite is Lacoste from 1984, another nice choice. Scott Burr says, scent of the day, finishing up a sample of Mousse de Sable from Les Indémodables, which means the timeless, for those who are not aware. Roxy Music, a great choice. Connects to Brian Eno as well. He was once a member of Roxy Music. Scott Bear said, 2 days ago, I heard Save It for Later by the English Beat at the supermarket. Yeah, supermarkets have the best music now. But you know why? Because that's oldies to all of the people who are younger than us. So it's like when we were kids and I used to hear big band music in the supermarkets.
Yeah,
Now they're playing the music of our childhood. Filippo Merelli, Joy Division are one of the most influential bands ever. Yes, they did make a significant mark on the music world, and I love New Order as well, that rose from the ashes of Joy Division. And Joshua B says, hello there, scent of the day, Lord from Molyneux. And Nick S says, I feel like Phileas was a refinement of things like Yatagan and Devon. Phileas is gorgeous, and I do think that it is kind of a refinement because they're introducing in that one a lot more space and a lot more atmosphere into it. It's less dense than Yatagan and Devon, so that is a great choice as well. Fougere Bengal Parfum de Pear is a nice throwback scent that manages to stay firmly in the present. I know, Chris, you were a fan. You did a video of that one.
it's featured in tonight. It's featured here.
Once we get into the 2010s, right?
2000s. No, it's
Oh, it is
2007, I think.
Oh yeah, it was 2000s. I can't believe that brand has been around for that long. God, time flies. Loewe Solo Mercurio and Loewe Essencia, Filippo.
Yeah, from Löwe,
And
my favorite is, I think, what was his name? Anonimo.
yeah. There was an incense version of
Yeah,
that
it's
too.
dark, but it's
Yeah,
very intriguing. It's very nice.
yeah. Very nice, very nice. Okay, let's have you talk some more about some of the goodies that you have set
Yeah,
aside.
well, I'm through with my 80s basically.
Oh, well,
For me, the music, I'm starting to very much discover these days Robert Palmer, believe it or not. What a versatile, great artist, and he rose to fame in the 80s as well. So that's another good part of the 80s, going
yes. Might as
into
well
the
face
future.
it. You're addicted to love.
Oh yeah, that's one of the one
I
of the
know.
most popular ones, but he's extremely versatile. I mean, he did reggae, he did blues, he did calypso, he did whatever.
Oh, he
It's
was so versatile. Very talented musician, very talented singer. My favorite of his was like more of an underground record. Well, it was like a minor hit, Johnny and Mary.
Yeah.
And also Looking for Clues. Those are really great from the early 80s. They weren't huge hits in the US, but they were actually kind of big in the dance clubs too, because they had kind of a
Wow.
dance
Yeah.
rhythm to them. I guess I'll share the rest of my 80s ones quickly.
Do.
There's a Check and Speak. This is number 88, Check and Speak. This is the Eau de Toilette or Eau de Cologne, maybe, but it's definitely not. Yeah, they call it a cologne, but it's a beast for a cologne. And then the Eau de Parfum. This was released in 1981. A lot
Wow.
of people think this is a modern niche fragrance, but it had been around for quite some time. It was a reflection of the 80s, but also it speaks to that sort of English sensibility as well. It's very dark and brooding, very heavy in this dark geranium with labdanum. So that's a nice one. And then of course, this is going to be predictable to some people, is Les Troisièments de Caron.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
New, old, it doesn't matter. This one's a little bit more fougere like. This one's a little bit more fresh on the clove and the floral qualities, but they're both beautiful. And niche was around or that far back because we have Sable from Annie Coutal, which started my love affair with the Immortelle. And agrestic sense in general. So for those who don't know what agrestic means, it reminds you of the countryside and of nature and the rawness and the coarseness and the beauty of nature. And Sabla definitely conveys that. And Immortelle to some people reminds them a bit of fenugreek or a bit of like maple syrup, but I don't think it's literally like either of them. It does have its own wildflower, dense, unctuous sort of resinous quality as well. And my last one from the 80s, because we can get right going into the 90s, is Parfum d'Habit. This is from Métaux Parfumeur Gantier. This is a beautifully rendered, complex leather fragrance. There are some interesting notes in Parfum d'Habit. I don't know if they are actually still producing this Métaux Parfumeur, but I hope that they are. This is an older bottle from when they used to do the red bottles. You see this rather garish cap, but I just have a soft spot for it. And this has a certain smoky, spicy, ambery quality to it as well. There's a significant blackcurrant note, patchouli, geranium, and the beautiful sandalwood. Let me tell you, the Maître Parfumeur Gantier has some of the best sandalwood accords. So that's my last one from the 80s. Let's just get right into that big decade. Oh, wait, no, I had one more. Sorry, Knowing from Estee Lauder, one of the last great Chypres, as far
Oh,
as I'm
yeah.
concerned. Yeah, so.
And I got two favorite from the 80s. Still, I quickly
Oh,
dug it
good,
out.
good. We can add some more. Oh, yes.
Alain
Alain
Delon.
Delon.
Alain Delon. This was the first fragrance I ever bought from. Not the bottle itself, but the first one, the classy one. I think 79, 80 was the year of this one. I just love this to bits. And the Plus version was coming out in 1987 then, but both are, well, this is probably a bit warmer. There's some pine in there, some aldehydes in there.
Mm-hmm.
Here there is. I think it's a very much along the lines actually of this one, but amped up with florals and a bit of coconut in there. As it's this one is crazy, rose, and it's typical child of the 80s. So it smells dated if you want, or it smells very chic and hip if it came out today by a niche house, right?
Oh,
So, but
yes.
all great quality. I mean, Alain Delon had his fragrances very much reflecting the standards that he was in regards to an actor. So, definitely these are ones that I had to quickly pull out to shine the light.
I used to have the one on the right, and then I lost it. And I
Oh,
haven't been able to. Yeah, I lost it, and when I moved, I lost about 5 fragrances when I had to move, and that was one of them. And I haven't replaced it, but now you
difficult.
reminded me. I need to replace it because it is lovely. Um, 90s now, huh?
Oh
Wow.
yeah.
Mm. Folks, 25 people who are tuned in. If you haven't liked the live stream, please be sure to do so. We're up to 23 likes at the moment. And let's try to aim for 30 by the end, at least by the end of this hour. That would be wonderful. And also, just a reminder to folks, buy me a coffee. You know the drill. You know what I have to offer. I have the deets right here, and that is pinned at the top. And you can visit the website there. My good friend Oris Eris, who contributed last week, I am currently putting together her 4 bottle grab bag and sample pack. So Nick F says, vintage G-Man is great. Love that combination of molybdenum and pelargonium in the heart. I
Oh,
love that pelargonium is what the geranium and fragrance is actually. That's what it actually is botanically. It's not a true geranium. It is a pelargonium. Love it. Thank you, Nick. 90s. It's time for the 90s. Get your hammer pants on. Get on your Cavarici, your Gerbo jeans.
saved myself.
All right. So I think I might want to go in chronological order and start with probably the most one of I would say it's the most famous one out of the ones that I set aside, and that is Egoist.
Oh yeah,
Egoist.
egoist,
Now,
egoist.
mm,
That's just every time you smell it, it's a different world. No, I mean
it's a different world from where you come from. I don't know if anybody's going to get that reference. We had a sitcom here in the States that was called A Different World, and that's how the
wow.
theme song begins. Um,
But you know that this was originally called Bois Noir.
Bois Noir, yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
87, I think, right? And
Yeah,
then they changed the marketing.
yeah. I just based it on when they changed the marketing and it was more commercially available in that. So technically it could be 80s, but I decided to slip it in because the official relaunch
Absolutely.
for it was in 1990. But it's near and dear to me, and it is the ambrette in this, the rosiness with the ambrette. Of course, there's sandalwood, but it is that ambrette seed, which, if people don't know what ambrette seed smells like, they see that it is in a composition, but they don't really know what they're looking for or what their nose is supposed to be smelling. Ambrette seed comes from these little seeds that come from a plant that is distantly related to hibiscus, and these seeds actually have a musk compound that is also that is an animal type musk that is created by a plant. It is also found in certain musk compounds in animals. So it gives off this deer musk kind of quality, but it isn't full on. It also has this nutty, fruity, um, unctuous, oily kind of feel to it, and also this very soft, plush kind of dry down. And that's what you get in this, especially
Yeah.
halfway through its development. And it's really what I think makes Egoist stand out is that. So, yeah, here
You
you
remember you
go.
remember the Austrian coming to music, actually 80s 90s coming to
Yeah.
music. You remember the Austrian pop star called Falco?
Ah, yes, of
Yeah.
course. Vienna
So
Calling.
I tell you something a little bit. He had a number one on the Billboard charts with Rock Me Amadeus back
Rock
in
me,
'80s.
Amadeus, Amadeus,
Yeah,
Amadeus.
exactly.
Yes.
And he wore Egoist, and he got a first of all first he wanted to name an album Egoist as well, and then there was only a song after that named after Egoist. But it's strange that when I saw a documentary after he died, he had the box of Egoist, this Egoist that you just saw, nailed onto his wall, and that was somehow serving him to write the song called Egoist, or Egoisten in German. And whenever I see the fragrance, I immediately get reminded of Falco. So this is where music and fragrance sort of connect, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I have to think about what Egoist conjures up musically in my mind. I don't know. Maybe it's like Chris Isaac or something. Because I think that around that same time, Wicked Game came out, and they
Mm.
had the Herb Ritz video, and it just has that kind of feel to me. Yeah.
No, he was just referring to actually the meaning of the word. So selfish person, right? So
yeah, yeah,
I'm just me. It's all about me and me, myself, and I, right? So that
yeah,
was
yeah.
the context of the lyrics of the song at the
Love
time.
it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Jean Jean, what fragrance do you associate with Budapest?
That's a good question because I'm doing I'm doing these reviews these days where I pick a few fragrances that remind me of a city, and I did Naples recently, I think. And I'm looking to do Dublin and Vienna and New York and all these cities that I like. And in Budapest, I wasn't really thinking because I have a love-hate relationship with the city, and so um, I'm not the greatest fan of Budapest, to be honest.
Mm.
It's one of the most beautiful cities of the world that I've ever seen, but at the same time, it's there is some issues with some things that go on in the city, but I don't want to go into that direction. But I didn't find any. I will do one day a review like this, but I haven't really found the angle to how to sort of attack the angle of attack to this particular review. Dublin is more easier for me because I don't know. I lived there for a few years. New York, I have some experiences, and Naples, we love, and we're going to do Crete, for example, Iraklion, which we love, and always every year go back, have friends there. So it's a bit more, probably if you're not sitting in the city every day, it's probably easier to kind of reflect, oh yeah, this is while if you're sitting in the city every day, you get less of an inspiration probably to start to be creative, because if I want to travel to Dublin in my mind, it's oh yeah, and then I pick this fragrance, that fragrance, and it makes sense, right? So I will come to it, but great question.
UK says Chris is a true Alain Delon ambassador. Thank you for opening for me, Iquitos. And JJ, thank you for Scentland on your stream. You guys are awesome. We've had Chris a couple times before. I think we had Chris in the first season, and we had an interesting pairing with you. Somebody else in the fragrance community, whom doesn't really show up in the fragrance community anymore. So that made for an interesting juxtaposition for your first one, if you recall. And then we had you with the oh goodness, who did we have you with the second time? We had you with Alex.
Yeah, Alex, definitely. Alex was in the review.
Oh
Yes,
God,
right.
why am I blanking? That's horrible because he's a wonderful human being, and he has such a great
Absolutely,
channel. How,
I
the
love him.
third,
Yeah, I love him. Well, he's Italian. What else can he be than
we
that wonderful, right?
and didn't we have a fourth person too for that second one?
Persoles. We had Persoles on.
I had Persiles on. I had
Yeah.
Persiles. I don't think
I,
it was on one of, but what's his name? Oh my God, he would kill me. That's awful. A wonderful gentleman. He does such wonderful videos.
Lanier.
Lanier. Oh my God.
Lanier,
Some
of course. The grand monsieur of the fragrance world.
God, my brain is fried from my job. Let me tell you, Chris, that's awful because I mean, he was one of the first ones that I watched. You
Yeah.
and him. So he'll
Wow.
he'll be giving me a spanking at some point.
Look at this.
Oh,
That's a cognac. Alain
cognac.
Delon,
Oh my
right?
God. And
Yeah.
that signature. I love his
Yeah.
signature.
Yeah, that's still on the bottle as well. But this is one of the last bottles in the world, actually. So thank you for the previous comment on Alain Delon.
Nice. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, UK. Scott Burr, all the kids in my area are deep diving into the 90s Nirvana and Deftones shirts, baggy skater pants. Bet CK1 will make a combat.
Combat, maybe.
Comeback. That's a Freudian slip, maybe. Christy says Ambret seed smells like an oily musk. I like it. Yes, I agree. And then we have Vladen Milosevic. Is Rocha Slam still your holy grail?
No.
All right, moving on. And Scott Bear says Lanier is an OG, true fragrance connoisseur and gentleman. And what else about the 90s? I
Go on.
I ended up pulling
plenty of fragrances
I
from the
ended up
90s.
pulling like God 30 fragrances here. I went crazy.
Wow.
Let's see. I mentioned Loewe, but this is going to be a surprise to people because this is a lesser known Loewe. This is lesser known and highly coveted one at this point, unfortunately. I wish it was still in abundance and still in production. It is Gala from Loewe.
Wow.
Now, this is a really opulent, rich, ambery, animalic fragrance. Like it is just transcendental if you love that kind of stuff. It has every kind of animalic possible. It has, the imitation of a deer musk. It has castoreum. It has a bit of civet. It has all of that, with just like this panoply of flowers above it, and plum and spices and all that kind of good stuff. And yeah, it is Gala from Loewe, and this one was released in, I believe it was 1991. So this is one of the last of its kind, for like this rich, opulent amber floral. Aldehydic at the top, and the jasmine and ylang ylang and rose and carnation and all this good stuff. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. This is my favorite from Loewe, and one of my favorites from the 90s, and it's a lesser known. We would be remiss without mentioning this one, at historically speaking, but it also happens to be a favorite, and it's from Shiseido, Féminité du Bois, the eau de parfum from Shiseido, which would then be relaunched under Serge Lutens. And this is one of my favorite cedars as well. And you have that contrast between the berry and plum and floral with this beautiful cedary dry down. It is considered iconic. So that's another one. Then I have, I'm going into some like early niche territory here with Masta Mimui. This is from Etro, one of my favorite. This is in the lovely paisley box. And Etro, I mean, I guess technically this is designer as well, because Etro is a designer label, but their fragrances have less of a mainstream quality to them. This is the original launch of it, which is like incense that is being burned in a cold, sort of musty, ancient stone space. Think a basement or a cellar. It is spectacular. And wearing it for me is a sacrament. I don't waste this kind of stuff. This is like on a spiritual level for me. I'm not just like going to the supermarket and spraying this stuff.
Sure.
It's when it's when you do sort of like
your occasion, and you choose whatever, of course there. I mean, we all have these fragrances that I sometimes pray to some of these bottles.
It's like doing inner work. It's like I have to. It's like if I'm meditating, I would put something on this on. It wouldn't be to go out on the town and have some drinks wearing my mustard Minui. It's a very specific kind of experience. Okay. So 90s. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where's my fifth 90s? I don't even know if I brought out a fifth 90s unless I set it aside somewhere. So I think, I think that will be it for 90s for me.
I got some.
How about you share them then?
Yeah.
A Lagerfeld photo.
Yes,
Very
yes,
nice.
1990. Yes, nice. Aldehydes, lavender, a bit of orangey. It's just stunning. It's extremely. It has some powderiness, but somehow it still comes across soapy and citrusy, and the lavender and the aldehydes. I got, at the time when I started to wear this, actually when it came out around 1991, I started to wear this, and this is still the original bottle, right? 125 mil. Compliments were raining. This was the absolute compliment getter at the time, and I still have a lot of people out there that I know who are craving this back. I think it was Lagerfeld's best by far. Unfortunately, discontinued, but this was just really, 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 really nice. One of those bottles that I sparingly use, along with 1991's. I don't know if you recognize it from the back.
I do recognize it. That's a great one. Yes,
versus
Gianni
Gianni Versace, yes. Chi è stato noi? Gianni Versace 1991 versus, and this one, this is a transition fragrance that you mentioned. This is
Right.
typically bringing the qualities of the 80s and trying to amp it up in a way that is just somehow more modern, and I think Gianni had a great sense of how to do that anyway. So I think I can his signature is on there, so probably he had a big role in developing this. And even more beautiful than this is the female
There you
counterpart,
go.
because this is just, I mean, this is sexuality in a bottle to me. It's just so, and it smells like it looks like. I think the colors, the color scheme is perfect. It's just so, it has this dark fruitiness about it. It just makes you, and these two, supposed to be going like this, so they sort of,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, so the design and everything is just, it just screams, it screams the genius of Johnny. And talking about, this is one of the times when designers still made sure that they bring out sort of, not every day, but when they come out with something that's actually you know quality stuff. I mean, Lagerfeld designed this bottle
Yeah.
himself. He
For
just
the original, and
he
then
didn't gave it, yeah, for the original one, but then they carried it on.
I love
Uh,
that they did that. Yeah.
Johnny designed this one,
Yep.
which I love. It's just carefree 90s, right? It's just
Mm,
blue jeans is just carefree 90s. It's colorful, citrusy, modern lavender, which I just use when I have a smile on my face. It's just perfect for that.
so much nostalgia comes up when I smell
It,
them.
it's true.
Yeah.
I went to walk my dog in the winter when I smelled it. Every time I wear this since, and that was 30 years ago. I'm reminded of that time when I walked the dog in the snow. So it's crazy, actually. It's mind games at this point, almost. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And one last one I have from the 80s, my favorite from the 90s. Sorry, my favorite of all of the 90s, and one of my favorite fragrance ever. Havana.
Ah, that's a good choice.
Havana. Yes, and it came in that dark blue cone type of bottle, right? So this
Yeah,
is
I
the
remember.
gentleman's collection version, which came out in 2008, I think. And I have minis from the other one as well. Don't know where they are. I first met this fragrance back in London in '95
Mm-hmm.
at Selfridges, I think. Downstairs there was this big thing, and immediately caught my attention. And every time I wear this today, even compliments, questions, what is this? Where can I buy it? It's unbelievable. And they discontinued it again. So it's a double
I
discontinued
know.
beauty. I don't know why. And it has this special take on lavender and special take on many things on this one, right?
Oh yeah. There's Natalie
Feistauer,
Feistauer.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think
She
so,
did it. Great perfumer. Great use of like a spice accord with
yeah,
the tobacco.
yeah,
Um, I think they call it an epicene base, and she modernized that a bit for the '90s, but still created that wonderful aromatic kind of tobacco fougere feel with it. It is sad to see these fragrances get discontinued again when they
yeah,
were resurrected in the
yeah,
gentleman's collection, because they were all classics in their own right. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Those damn
Aramis
number
900
crunches.
was there as well, and
Yep.
Tuscany, and although Tuscany I
JHL.
still see around. I think that's not discontinued.
Which one?
Tuscany, remember?
Really? Out of all of them, that's
I
interesting.
can still see it in stores in Vienna, for example. It's still
That's
there.
so interesting. I wonder if they just had a lot of stock and they're still selling it, or that's the only one they're producing. The whims of these people, like I maybe they just saw that was the one that was selling the best. Who knows? Who knows? Oh, and Nick S just said it's being discontinued. So is when was that? Like, or yeah. I mean, who knows? There just could be a lot of stock still sitting around. So
Maybe, yeah.
if that's the case, just get it while you can. Bren, hello. Good evening to you as well. Great to have you here for the live stream. We have currently 28 likes and we're at 4 o'clock. Let's try to get that to 35 in the next few minutes. Bring it up to 20. From 28 to 35, we have 25 people who are tuned in. And Josh says, I have Havana. It is nice. Filippo says, such a lovely tobacco. And then we have Scott mentioning that Natalie also composed the underrated Cartier Pasha Edition Noir. What's that? Are you still enjoying your Havana there?
Yes,
Oh
yeah,
yes.
can't get
Please,
rid of it.
by all means, enjoy.
Yes.
I have actually one more because I forgot, and then I'll just mention it quickly and then just pass it back over to you because I just forgot this. One of my favorite houses is Sur Luten's. This is La Mer. This was released in 1995. This was originally released under the Shiseido brand and then had moved over to the Serge Lutens label. Beautiful aldehydic, um, sparkling, bittersweet, ambery, and of course that signature myrrh. There's a myrrh absolute, a myrrh oil. Basically, any kind of myrrh extraction is in this, and that gorgeous garnet color, that red, deep red color is beautiful, beautiful stuff. And it's only sold in Le Cloche, which is French for bell, so that's the bell jar, and it has only ever been in the bell jar. It's never been in any other version since it was being sold by Shiseido. So that was the last one from the 90s there. What else do you have up your sleeve from the 90s?
That was it for me from the next. But there's plenty of other stuff out there. I mean, you remember Good Life from Davidoff, beautiful. I mean, the
Yeah.
90s were really, really stuff. There's really stuff out there from the 90s that there was everything on the scale. I mean, Insensé from Givenchy. I mean, like
Yeah. We just mentioned here
beautiful. What about
Rochester.
Adam from Joop?
I was going to mention that as sort of because you mentioned Good Life. I immediately thought of What About Adam?
Yeah,
That
same
tomato
color,
leaf.
right?
Same color. Yop
Yeah.
had some good ones. Yop had that, and there was. I also just was wearing one that was marketed to the ladies called Berlin.
Oh
Berlin,
yeah.
yeah, lovely heliotrope vanilla, very soft, very subtle compared to the vanillas of today, which are so in your face. You're getting hit by like a brick made of vanilla with some of this stuff. Joshua says just recently I got Calvin. No one talks about that one. We're talking about the original men's Calvin from Calvin Klein.
So 82 or something, I think it was. Yeah.
82. Yeah.
Yeah.
The two first perfume releases from Calvin were the best, and they never really, I mean, they've had some pretty decent ones after that. But the original Calvin Klein, gorgeous, gorgeous Rose Chypre, that's a wonderful men's fragrance as well, the Calvin. And I think what did they do, Chris? They relaunched it for a bit in like the late 90s. I think they brought it back for a couple of years.
But I don't, it wasn't really yeah, because Calvin Klein went into a total different direction afterwards. So again, some nice ones. I like popping up Eternity or Escape from the 90s or late 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
93, I think, Escape. Sort of trying to start a trend. Or Tommy, I mean, the first Tommy fragrance is just that's an iconic blend, right? The true American blend, fragrances like that and Blue Jeans remind me of the soap opera of Friends, right? With Joey and Chandler and everybody. Everything was colorful. Everybody was sort of romantic and happy, and that was the 90s, right? And you had the same thing with the fragrances. You could really find some great stuff without having to reach for niche necessarily.
True, because some of them would be precursors to what will become niche anyways. Like the What About Adam could have very well have been something that was released, by a niche house the next decade, and things like Benetton, Tribou could have been like a
Tribou, one of my wife's favorites, Benetton Tribou, absolutely, yeah. And that's a simple drugstore fragrance, right? It's so beautiful.
I swear I could put that into a vial and label it as like the newest niche release, and people would be like, "Where is it? Where can I buy it? Who makes it?"
Yeah. Greetings from my wife. She's please, yeah. She's getting a bottle just for us to show, because we have, I think,
yes, show the Tribou.
Tribou, yes, Tribou is coming down the stairs in a minute.
I really like Tribou. It is like it reminds me of Baronia flowers, which are native to not Africa. Goodness gracious, native to Australia, and it has like a low key kind of tobacco smell to it. It's very beautiful. I think that it's just it has a unisex appeal for the current age, and people don't talk about it very much because I guess they think Benetton's like wasn't really as cool of a designer brand. But I never really thought that way about like
No,
there's a great ones from the '90s for sure. I think the '90s gets a bad rep. Everybody like worships what happened in the early to mid 20th century, even the 60s and 70s, and to a point the 80s. But the 90s gets overlooked. But so many great fragrances to come out of the
absolutely.
90s.
Actually, one of my favorite decade probably because there really were good things around, and everybody had the balls to experiment.
Right,
It's
right.
not like everybody tried to. Nowadays, if you come out at the end of the if you would come out with something like Fahrenheit in
Yeah,
'88, everybody would do Fahrenheit, like because
yeah,
it's a massive seller, right?
yeah.
Yet Dior did Fahrenheit, but other this Boss did Spirit, and Lagerfeld did Photo, and Joop did Night Flight, and Aramis did Havana. Totally different fragrances, right? They were not following
Right.
Fahrenheit because everybody buys that. No, let's try to create some competition and be creative and create something that is equally as successful, but not the copycat of Aventus or Bleu de Chanel or 1 million like these days. Every second designer
Sauvage. Yeah.
fragrance.
Yeah, it sucks. It's just so sad the way things go. Yeah, look at that. One of my favorite bottles too. Like they just don't make bottles like this anymore that are like architectural, like pieces of like sculptures.
Yeah,
So much fun. What a
yeah,
great fragrance that
it,
is.
it was. It was.
My
I don't even
regards
know
to your
the year.
wife.
What
What's
year
that?
it was? 92 or something?
93. It was
93.
93. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
wild. Love it.
She's very happy now because she's a lifelong fan of Tribu, and nobody really ever mentions it. But this time, now it is there.
It needs its recognition for sure, for sure. There's a few like those in the '90s. I think people just really think about like the usual, the CK1 and
Yeah,
the Aqua di Gio and everything, and the very light citrus dihydromercenol, lavender, and clary sage kind of thing. That was really popular. But there were a lot of other things that came into popularity. Like the women's fragrances too. Like you think about things like Gucci Envy. Gucci
yeah,
Envy was a renaissance of what was happening in the '70s and the '90s. Like that was really
beautifully done. Yeah,
beautifully, beautifully done. Thank you, Filippo, for the super sticker of 349 euros. Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for your long time support. Lots of risk taking in perfumery, right, Nick? Such an optimistic decade, and the fragrances really reflected it. I do agree. I'm thinking about another lovely one too. The Dreamer, Versace, the
Oh
Dreamer.
yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely.
Another wonderful clary sage fragrance. I think there's I looked at sort of the GCMS of that, and that has like a big amount of clary sage. It's like the most there's more clary sage in it than any other natural in the fragrance.
Wow,
I think it's like 15%, which is a lot when
wow.
you think of a natural. Yeah, it really is what gives it its character. um 2000s.
Let's rock it. Let's rock
Let's
it.
rock it.
Your
This is
turn.
where we start seeing more of the niche brands because they started doing better than the
Right.
designer brands. But I don't really think I have one from a designer for the next 2 decades out of the ones that I had chosen. But all right, get this all lined up here. This is Frederic Malle, Un Fleur de Cassis. This is a Dominique Ropion. This was in the original line of Frederic Malle, and this is dedicated to Cassis, which is in the same family of trees as Mimosa, but it has a slightly different scent profile. So make no mistake, this is not Un Fleur de Mimosa, it's Un Fleur de Cassis, and it harkens back to some of the early to mid 20th century fragrances that maybe were released by Balenciaga or by Vile or even like Worth, like I'm thinking like Danse la Nuit. But Or I also think of like Edmund Rudnitska when I smell this as well.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's
Huh.
very earthy, very animalic, really carnal. That's the word. It is like there is like this dirty sort of under current to it. So this beautiful sort of pungency and that contrast with the soft, powdery, sunny, and polleny. Like that's the only way I can describe it. Like pollen from a flower
Yeah.
that the cassie gives off, and it is just spectacular. It is
Wow.
one of the what I think is one of the masterpieces of modern perfumery, Un Fleur de Cassis. And Filippo, has that been officially announced that they discontinued Un Fleur de Cassis? Maybe because they can't use the amount of cassis because you know how the restrictions are with naturals. They'll decide that you can no longer use the same percentage. I think there's like a pretty large percentage of the Cassis Absolute here, and maybe the draconian measures of the European Union forced IFRA to change the percentage, and then they realized, well, if they're going to do that, then it's not going to smell anywhere like it used to because you're not going to be able to use anywhere near the amount that is necessary to make it smell the way that it did. Or simply they decided, yeah, it's not a good seller. It's not modern enough.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to like it. Let's discontinue it. Any way you look at it, sucks. Scott Bear, speaking of Frederic Malle, is Musc Ravageur still worth picking up or has it been altered too much? I cannot speak to that because I haven't had any quantity of Musc Ravageur since 2013. So I've not been up to date on it. I'm not the right person to ask, but more 90s? Sure, why not? Les Dormiens, a lot of people know this is one of my favorites. This is Miller Harris. This was actually a fragrance that was made for Brigitte Bardot. And this smells like old books in a dusty library or bookstore with this beautiful amber and then like so. Chris, you know how like the glue that puts together books, they call it lignin, and it has the same properties as vanilla. So
Yeah.
even though vanilla is in this, you don't get like your usual vanilla smell.
Uh-huh.
You think of like that glue that is used for the binding of the books. And there's also costus, so it smells like warm skin, scalp, and oiliness, sort of like sebaceous, beautiful, beautiful stuff. This was another release from the 2000s, one of my top 10 favorites of all.
Wow.
And this one is Bois d'Ambly. This has been discontinued. Yet again, another
I know
discontinued
this one.
fragrance. Sure thing. Do your thing. Bois d'Ambly from Eau d'Italie. This is a Bertrand Duchaufour. And this is this beautiful smelling. This isn't that goes into that kind of like pastoral agrestic kind of category. You're obviously noticing a trend on the things that are my most favorite. And this is like a tobacco scent, but it's also driven by carrot seed. There's a lot of
Oh, I
carrot
love.
seed in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And carrot seed smells kind of like carrots. So
Yeah. Yeah. I like it actually. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it just smells kind of marshy as well. Not the dirty, smelly kind of marsh, but like that smell of like just water that has like aquatic plants in it, like like brackish. And then it has like that very chewy, rich tobacco in it. But yeah, I first picked this up in 2008, long time ago, and I've loved it ever since. I've had two bottles since. I used to have it goes a long way, obviously, but the older bottles used to be rounded, kind of like more like a canister, and then they changed this bottle, and then when Eau d'Italie changed this bottle to a new bottle,
Uh-huh.
they said goodbye to this one. Nope, they're not going to sell it anymore. And then the last one I think I have. Did I go through all the one, two? No, there's still one more. Are you sure this is okay, Chris?
No, absolutely. I'm just gonna grab one more.
Okay, great. I don't want to feel like I'm, you know, because we could always ping pong back and forth too. Thundra from Profumum Roma. This is God. This hits like this like releases dopamine and serotonin just from the atomizer, just from
Huh.
like the from the nozzle. Like I don't even need to wear it. It just makes me feel like ecstatic
Yeah.
just smelling it. This is an ingenious use of patchouli and a few other elements to almost smells very much like the forest and even like mushrooms. And I know some people are like, mushrooms, why would I want to smell like that? But stay with me here. Like it's like the aspect of mushrooms that you would love in oak moss, except there really isn't oak moss driving this. And it just has a very naturalistic and profoundly um, outdoorsy and woody kind of scent to it that is
Which
very
one is
hard
that?
to achieve. This is from Profumum Roma, and it's called Thundra.
Okay.
It's a pretty expensive house, but I'm telling you, you know,
I know. Yeah, yeah, but I didn't hear of this fragrance.
yeah, this one is not spoken of much. But it's just this beautiful, and it's a lot of musk in it as well. There's actually some spearmint, but it doesn't smell too minty. The spearmint is what I think creates that kind of effect of like you have this herbaceous greenness at the top, and then you have the patchouli holding it together, but a whole lot of musk, and maybe this material that in perfumery is called amyl vinyl carbonate, and I think that's what it's called, which smells kind of fungal, like fresh mushrooms, like growing off of a tree. It's just
Mm.
incredible stuff. It's my favorite from the house. Between this and Arso, which I
Still
also really love.
available?
I think it is still for sale. I recommend everyone not to blind buy because you might think it smells like poop. I don't think it smells like poop. I don't mean literally poop, but you know what I mean. You always want to sample it. Give it a sample. Try it out. If that sounds good to you, I don't know. It's just I think it's beautiful. Yeah, forget I said poop. It is not like a poopy smell. It, I don't want people to think that like they're gonna. There's nothing poopy about it. But I was basically just meaning if you think it smells like nothing you want to smell, um, at least you sampled it first. But once you sample it, and maybe something that you love, if that's your kind of style, just an ingenious creation. And it's still a mystery. Who's the perfumer or perfumers for Profumum Roma? It's like they want to remain anonymous, or
Mm.
it's interesting. And then one last one from the 2000s, from one of my favorite perfumers, Lorenzo Villoresi, and this is yerba mate. And
Ah,
yerba mate, this is it's a trend, outdoorsy, agrestic, pastoral, new mown hay. There is a mate accord, but there's a lot of lavender and there's a lot of hay. There's a lot of tonka. It just smells like it smells like pastoral. It smells autumnal, but also spring-like too. I think those transitional seasons this would work really well. But yerba mate was actually the first from Lorenzo Villoresi that I purchased, and this was actually in Provincetown here in Massachusetts. They had a perfume shop that sold all of the Lorenzo Villoresi, and that's where I began my love affair with his work. And it's just enchanting. It just feels carefree. There's green notes. There's tea. There's that hay. There's a feeling of grassiness, and also this soft, powdery gentleness to its dry down as well. And it's just quintessentially Lorenzo Villoresi because he knows his way around herbal and textural and spice. And this is a great example of it. Those are my
I love his.
2000s.
Yeah, yeah. This is. I think he had. Was it his? Yeah, he had an incense fragrance out that was amazing.
And Sensi, I think it's called. Yeah, yeah.
As Incensi, see, Incensi.
Incensi. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
I
yeah. I
try to
love.
be on point with the pronunciation, but I know that it can be tough for me, a humble American.
But you speak. You seem to have some French on you.
Yeah. I did take French. I took a couple of years of French, a couple of years of Spanish. The things that really stuck for me the most is getting the pronunciation correct. As far as being fluent, I need to revisit it. I was actually thinking of doing a Rosetta Stone and getting myself fluent in French again.
Hmm.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
nice.
do it. Yes, yeah. Come on.
Yeah, get out. I mean, while I'm still young enough and I can still halfway learn another language, right?
Absolutely.
Someone actually mentioned agrestic today on base notes regarding Monsieur Rochas. It's catching on. Chris, what Jacques Bogart scents do you have in your collection? Are you willing to disclose that information?
Uh, yes, I have the. I used to have Furio,
For you, yeah.
yeah, which to reminded me too much of.
Was it Kuros or
I don't know, but I was on the fence with that, and but I from Bogart my favorite one is what's the name? The name escapes me.
is it the
I,
old one or a newer one?
it's a newer one. It's 2010. Interestingly, I know the
Is it
year.
Bogart Perot?
No,
No.
um,
Riviera Nights.
Riviera Nights. Exactly,
There you go.
Riviera Nights. That's not the Arabian Nights, the Riviera Nights.
Yeah.
I like that one. My problem is with Jacques Bogart is that I somehow seem to detect as if there is a backbone that they always use for every fragrance, and they add a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's not for me. It's somehow the finesse is a bit missing. It
Yeah.
smells
Especially
the
for the
performance is there
2000s
and
ones.
everything, but it has some overall DNA to it that I don't really truly appreciate. It's too
I know
it
what you
smells
mean.
to me like a factory fragrance that
Yeah,
no.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. It's like the opening development can be compelling, but then there's something in the middle where you're kind of confused as to what's going on, and it often smells like a very synthetic orange blossom or like
Yeah,
like grape, and
yeah,
it just sort of sticks out like a sore thumb with a few of them. I
right.
agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
So
like yeah, yeah. There's an old one, the older ones actually, from the time that I think maybe they had more of a budget for their perfumes. I'm partial to like the original one. There's Deveris, which is a very rare one, and that smells uncharacteristic of not only a Bogart but also of anything from the 80s, and that's incredible but extremely rare. And then One Man Show, I like the original One Man Show, but all the flankers, I think I got them all cheap a number of years ago, and I just never picked them up, so I got rid of
yeah, yeah.
them. Yeah, yeah. Oh, cool. If Filippo has a 15 mil of Thunder, very nice.
I will actually
Uh,
try that fragrance. I never tried it, but
give it a
you
shot.
intrigued me.
Let me know what you think of it. It is, it's definitely much more of an artistic rendering for a fragrance, but it's beautiful to me. We Are Sentient. They have one that smells like someone dropped a vanilla ice cream and it's melting, and it's the worst perfume for one of them. Is that for Jacques Bogart, or it sounds like it could be a Jacques Bogart
Yeah,
actually?
yeah, yeah. Exactly. Sorry for that. Right.
It just like that's what I assumed. Photo is nice. It smells a little bit like some yeah, in the same wheelhouse. I think it's a little bit better quality. Bogart makes me think of cheap 80s detective TV series for some reason. Wait, are you talking about like oh god, what are the 80s ones? Jesus, like Hardcastle
MacGyver.
and
You know,
Nicole.
that's
Remington Steele. I don't know. That's funny. Wow, wow. Thank you so much, Fernando, for the super sticker. That's very kind of you. The wrench is here. I missed that from earlier. This is our resident wrench, our moderator. Is this the Keanu Reeves of perfume? Somebody's just being silly. He's a good guy. That's all right. And no, we already read that one. We're all up to. We're all caught up. Chris, what do you
2000.
have?
I wonder if I wonder if you ever heard or smelled this fragrance, because this is
Me
really
or just
rare.
any of us? Okay,
Just anybody,
just
but especially you
especially me.
have
Okay.
this huge collection. So there you go.
No, but I know of its existence.
Yes, it's a liquid Carl, and
Yeah.
it's very strange because it. You remember when Karl Lagerfeld decided to do a clothing line for H&M,
Yes.
and he said at the time that he wants to have a fragrance that is actually interesting, because you even have the vintage. It's December 2004
That's when I remember seeing it was
written up there, and
yeah.
he wanted the fragrance that smells like freshly baked bread, and this is exactly the smell. So this is nothing. Not is was never in the official Lagerfeld lineup. Whatever. This is just the smell of freshly baked bread, and was very much limited. And if you want to in the morning, smell to your breakfast like freshly baked bread, this is definitely one to go to. But I really like Carl and his personality and all that, so I had to get this one. It's crazy how it smells like bread. But let's go into the niche. I agree that niche was definitely picking up, and somebody in the comments mentioned it before. One of my all-time favorite fragrances, the most nostalgic fragrance, I'm going to tell you why, is Fougère Bengale.
Very nice to see an appearance from Parfum de Pierre. There will be
Yeah,
another one soon.
this one is just it has this herbal quality with an unbelievably well done sort of woody curry
Yeah.
note in there. Um, and it strangely reminds me of the times where, again, when I was out with my dog, and then I went back and my mother was still alive, and I was living with my mom, and I would open the front door going in. She was cooking chicken curry, and the smell of the house along with the smell of the food is 100% this. So it's extremely
Mm,
nostalgic to me, this fragrance. Summer, I can't just wear it like you said, going to the shop or to Tesco, but there are those occasions when you just want to surround you with that sort of aura or era that this was about. So, and the quality is tremendous, and I really
mm.
love Fougère Bengale. I think it's 2007, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was part of one of his, because he had, I think, God, what year did he start? He launched the house. I don't think it was much earlier than that. So, yeah, I can't believe he's been around for that long. I remember first seeing them in the stores, and he had a very different kind of bottle at the time with a different cap,
Mm.
and it took me years before I finally added something, because I was much more cautious about spending my money on perfume. Obviously, that went out the window in recent years.
Yeah, that's material for a totally different 2 hours discussion, right? How not to do this.
So he is interested in hearing our opinions about the Lubin house. I have an old Lubin, and I'm not going to dig it up now, but I do have a review on my Instagram. It is actually a very obscure Lubin and was marketed to men in the early 80s. I mean, I guess I can, maybe I will bring it out. It's called Rouge de Lubin, and it's a very cool bottle. Chris, why don't you take the lead here and entertain people while I just go right over here and get the bottle? I'll show
Get
people.
the bottle. Get the bottle. I have a story on Lubin. I was in Paris, and wandering along the stores, and I went into the Lubin store, and I had the luck to meet the owner there. His name escapes me, stranger, but he's in my Facebook friends, and we still keep in touch. And I reviewed my favorite Lubin is Upper Ten, which is a reference to the upper 10,000 society back in the early 20th century that was creating all the buzz, and after McKinley, or with President McKinley, then the huge success that the American economy was growing, and it represents those types of days. Upper 10, it smells very very leathery, very expensive, and there was another one which was a vetiver fragrance that smelled like a Wild Western movie. I really love that one. I have a very good opinion on. There's a fragrance called Idol as well, or
Yeah,
Idol,
yeah. Idol.
that I love as well. So Lubin, I think it's an expensive maison, but you get your good quality there. And as I say, the owner who has taken over when Lubin was sort of nowhere, he took over, and then he sort of rebuilt the whole image. And I think it's a great house, and not everybody knows it, which is good. So it's a good choice, I think, if you go to a niche direction.
Sure thing, sure thing. And it's great that for a very old house, which had some classics, way back when, like El de Luban, and Gin Fizz, some of these classics in the 50s or the 70s, that they were able to reinvent themselves and target that niche market, and have these releases that just fit square into that whole aesthetic, including the magnificent bottles as well. And this is one of the last.
Gilles Thévenin is the guy that I met.
Okay.
Gilles Thévenin, who took over Lubin and sort of invested and brought it up to another level. Very, very nice gentleman, Gilles.
And I think that he did relaunch El de Lubin.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Gin
Yeah,
Fizz.
yeah.
This one was not relaunched. This is the obscurity. This is Rouge du Lubin. So here is the box.
Wow.
Rouge du Lubin. This is in English, concentrated cologne for men. In the English-speaking market, men wore colognes, even though technically, you flip it over, it's in French, eau de toilette, pour homme. So it actually,
I know. Yeah.
That's why when you read cologne, it doesn't necessarily mean the concentration is that of an eau de cologne. Vaporisateur naturel, natural spray. So that's the beautiful box, sort of in this red marbly kind of look. And then check out the bottle, which is one of the most unique bottles I have ever seen. Because, take a look at this. So this comes with this seal. I left the seal on here because this is, to me, a museum item just as much as a fragrance that I enjoy spraying on those special occasions. But I wanted the seal. I'm going to go into like a close-up. You'll still be there, Chris, but I'm going to do a close-up to try to show people. So this seal is actually something that you have to either tear off or, as I did, because I'm a collector just as much as somebody who wears it. I did this little, I use like a straight edge, and that's actually the seal for this plastic case. So it says Lubin, and it says it all the way around.
Wow.
And it is in this enclosure, this coffin. And then what you do is you open this. And this is only because of that seal, because it still kind of has the adhesive. But you open it, and then here you go. Here is the fragrance. And you can take this out, but I don't recommend it if you ever get one, because you don't want to. I mean, it's just too precious. The enclosure is so beautiful. But you can just spray it from here. And this fragrance, it's hard to sort of pin down exactly what this fragrance is like. I would say that it is sort of in the same realm as Dunhill Blend 30. Sorry, I was going to say Blend 33, like Brute 33, like Blend 30 from Dunhill, or a Bain de Balmain. That interesting sort of transitional period like we were talking about, where it's still carrying some things from the 70s, and it's sort of that they're experimenting with using kind of like doing more aromatic herbal fougères with like a musky leathery base. I would say that all the people who are completely obsessed with things like Rochas Macassar, which is beautiful in its own right, but my God, nobody can get it anymore. People are selling it for $700. Yeah, even the aftershave is gorgeous, and now even the aftershave is like it's really expensive. This is in the same realm as that too, like Macassar. Pat Tu Pour Homme has nothing on this. It's just this very wonderful fragrance. Obviously, it wasn't commercially successful because you don't really see too much about it. So I don't know how long it was on the market, but isn't that cool? Beautiful, beautiful fragrance, Rouge de Lubin. And it's actually the only Lubin that I got a full bottle of in my collection. Because I promised myself, if I'm going to get this Lubin, that's going to be the Lubin that ends all of them. So that's going to be the one for me. So that's one of my prized possessions for very special occasions, not to spray, all the time, because I don't want it to run out. So that's my take on Lubin. I think Lubin I agree with Chris. I think they have some great current releases. I think they did a pretty good job with relaunching some of their classics. The classics are hard to recreate, as you can imagine, but I think they did a pretty good job at it. Filippo says, "Love Idol." Josh asks, "Have you ever smelled Quasar by Jesus del Pozo?" Released in '94, has a prominent
banana. Yeah, the green banana fragrance.
I haven't, but Chris has.
Yes, yes, yes. It's favorite of a good friend of mine who became a friend due to this passion for fragrance, and it's one of his favorite ones. And it really smells this green, fruity banana type of almost exotic, but still grounded. It's a very appealing fragrance. I really like it.
Very cool bottle from what I recall as
Yeah.
well. It is super rare, but patience is a virtue, people. I know that people drive up the hype and say, you gotta have this. This is a must have. Be patient with these rarities. What you do is this. I've mentioned these tips before on my channel. Do a saved search on whatever marketplace that you look for things, look for fragrances, and you'll get notified of when one comes up for sale. Then, when it comes up for sale, you decide if you can afford it. And if it's too expensive, just keep it as a safe search until it comes up and it's affordable. That way you're not racking up all, the expense that you're spending all this money that you can't really spend just because you want something right away. You got to be patient. It took me for Rouge de Lubin, it took me 7 years until I finally found one.
Wow.
And I found it for a good price. And that's not to say that I didn't see others. They were coming up, but they were just too expensive for me. So I just had to wait until the price was right. Furio and One Man Show Red Bottle. So Joshua was mentioning the ones he has. Hello, Oris Eris. I would love to pick up Lubin Glisette. Pretty mass appealing rose, but slightly weird incense and ambergris in there as well. Getting all his rare bottles out like an enthusiastic museum curator. Yeah, it's kind of like I'm a museum curator, more than just a fragrance wearer at this point. Chunga from Vile. That's a really good find. That is a wonderful one. And Selfie from Olfactive Studio. Very nice. We're all caught up with the chat. 2010s. We're at the home stretch here. 2010. Unless you had any more from the 2000s. Do you have any more you
I
want to
got
share?
two more.
Let's have you share. I don't want to rush you. So do the two from 2000s. Let's hear it from you.
Yeah, one is a wonderful fragrance and a total marketing failure, um, and it's by the house of Paco Rabanne, right?
Ah,
It was called
yes.
O, and it came out in 2002, and they called it at the time the new take on a fougere fragrance. Okay, the modern fougere, and it smells actually how it looks like, this crystal clear. I think the main player is still lavender here, so it has a classy backbone, but it's just so clear cut, nice, just like the bottle. It smells like spring water. It's really wonderful. I really like it, and it totally went down the drain. I mean, that's when
Mm,
Paco Rabanne got all the headaches, and they created 1 million a few years after, right? And
mhm.
they live off that ever since. And but this is from a time when Paco Rabanne was still sort of trying to create something new. 2002. I love it. I really love this. This is so fresh. It's one of the freshest fragrances, one of the most Italian fragrances. Um, Missing our friend, the perfume guy here. But this is 2005, Moschino Friends. Um, this is such a nice herbal sort
Mhm.
of sour um, citrus fragrance that it really smells like if you're sitting together with friends at a long table in, I don't know, somewhere in Italy and in Toscana or in around Naples or whatever you want. I prefer Naples, and you just enjoy living. It's such a great uplifting, but not um, so obvious citrus fragrances. It has had this herbal bitterness and sourness about it. And since I love sour and bitter things, I really appreciate this. No sweetness at all. Um, and it's a very complex blend, and it has great woody base to it as well. And great geranium in here, very nicely displayed
Yeah.
as well, and a petitgrain as well. So it's a really a herbal citrus woody fragrance that is so Italian, one of the most Italian fragrances that I adore in the designer department, let's say.
Chris, your video on Friends inspired me to pick it up, and it is um, so underrated. It is one of the best citruses that I have ever
You really
smelled.
like it, yeah?
Purely because of the reason it has that sort of astringent, bitter,
Yeah,
sour feeling that makes it feel more authentic. That Petit Grain has that gives it that green leafy
yeah,
oil, citrus oil quality to it. It is just gorgeous. A big tip, and I don't know if it was because you mentioned in your video, but I just generally do this with citrus fragrances. Keep that in a dark, cool place. Do not have that sitting around anywhere. I keep my citruses stored away from all of the elements and away from light so that they last a while, because I know that that one, because it's just so complex and delicate, I just wouldn't want the beauty
yeah.
to perish. But that's a wonderful one. That's actually between that and the Moschino Porom, those are the two favorites from that house. Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice choice. Do you guys have the original Jaguar vintage version? That was one. I think the reason why I didn't pick that up is I got a sample of it, and while it is nice, and I think it was the sample version, it was a little too similar to other fragrances that I already had, and it's honestly like that style of aromatic from the 80s. There were lots of them that were being released for the gents, and that one to me I felt like is better rendered through like Van Cleef and Arpels SAR, and maybe the Loewe Essentia. It's not bad. It's just after a while, and I'm sure Chris, you notice this as well. There's some redundancy, so it's like, do I really need to get that version of the same kind of style? It's like,
Yeah.
so that's pretty much the reason why I didn't pursue that as part of my collection. So, and UK, I found that very cheap but not bad fragrance, Gianmarco Venturi Frames Oud. That
Wow.
smells very, very similar to the rare and beautiful
That's a good
Rochas
that's a good
Matissa.
brand, and the frames
Mm,
frames had some great fragrances out there, and I don't know
mm.
if it's still available or not, but that fragrance line came out with some great ones. There was this red one. I don't know what this square shaped bottle. And it was red. It was a better version of Fahrenheit. Absolutely stunning. Um,
So
good
we're at the
fragrance.
2010s.
Yeah.
We're at the last decade here. I have one that's sitting in its box because I think the box is pretty neat too. Sicily Paris has some great fragrances. I have a number of them. I love Eau de Campagna, the original that was composed by Jean-Claude Ellena in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. The Soir de Lune is beautiful, Eau de Soir. And this is one that was released and marketed to the gents some years back, and it has been relaunched under a different name. But this is the original launch. It's called Eau de Car, Eau de Car from
Oh
Sicily.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And this is driven by mastic resin. And mastic resin is one of my favorite materials in fragrance, and it is an acquired taste, which may be the reason why it didn't become a huge hit for Sicily, and they repackaged it as part of like a newer line that they have. This is the bottle, very,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very cool. And yeah, mastic resin it has this kind of granular, textured, incensey quality to it, but it's also very bitter and very green. And it has sort of this raw quality to it as well. So I think it might have been like a little bit too interesting
Uh,
for the mainstream market, but I think it's just wonderful. Like this also has carrot seed in it as well. Um, Green, tea like. There's an orris root. There's a vetiver and sandalwood in the dry down, but it's really driven by mastic, oil, and resin. So yeah, that is one of my favorites from the decade of 2010. But let me tell people this is, if you can't find this original version, you can actually, let me look it up because I don't know it by name. I think the name is very similar actually. Yeah, it's L'Eau Rêvée d'Icar. So it's still called Dicar, but it's under the L'Eau Rêvée line, which was released by Sicily in just 2 years ago in 2023. There you go. And you had Fougere Bengal, and I have another one from Parfum de Pierre, and that is Musk Tonkin.
Wow.
Yeah, this. Oh, God, that just speaks for itself. If it elicits that kind of response, that means I love with a big heart. And so Marc Antoine Corticchiato it makes this a mystery. He chose not to do like this elaborate notes breakdown, just musk. But obviously, there are many different things that are creating this illusion of a Tonkin musk, which Tonkin would be the musk deer. So, in an homage for that, we have aldehydes and florals and resins and different kinds of musks, synthetic and otherwise, and it is just spectacular. It's unisex as far as I'm concerned. This to me, I prefer this to Musk's Kubla Khan from Serge Lutens. I know, go figure. I'm a huge Serge Lutens fan, and I prefer this to that. But yeah, this is my favorite from the house, Musk Tonkin.
Wow.
Then we have this is kind of like this is technically, I think, a release that Oritz Legrand had when it was when it was a house in the early 20th century, and then it was resurrected a number of years ago. This was released by the house in the 2010s, re-released, but I'm going to consider it a 2010 scent because I'm sure it doesn't smell exactly like the original. Chypre Mousse. Chypre Mousse is another incredibly agrestic pastoral. You're deep into the woods. There are aspects of like mint and tarragon and oak moss. This is like, even though this was formulated after oak moss restrictions, this is proof positive that you can have a strong oak moss presence in a fragrance without necessarily using a lot of the actual absolute from the oak moss lichen. It just smells. It's in that same category, honestly, as Thundra, honestly, in that it really is evocative of the natural realm in a way that transcends that impression in most perfumes. Um, there's like clover in it. There's like angelica root. There's fennel. There's a little mastic in this as well, but it's not as far as the Dakar. There is a bolete accord, and bolete is a type of very aromatic mushroom. There's coniferous sort of aspects
What's
to
the
it,
name of it?
leathery aspects. It's called Chypre Mousse.
Mm.
It is quite a Chypre. It is not. This is not like your Mitsuko Chypre. This is like much more um, complex even than Mitsuko. I just absolutely adore it. It's from Oritza et Legrand. Chypre Mousse, and it's one of my top five. So some of the ones that I'm listening that I'm mentioning, the favorites from the decades, are also like my all-time favorites. So two more. I'll just bang these out. Afternoon of a Fawn from Etat Libre d'Orange. This, and if you also notice a trend with my preferences for fragrances, so there's one trend, things that are very naturalistic to the extreme, or new fragrances that really pay a lot of homage to older fragrances, and
Yeah.
that's the way it is with Afternoon of a Fawn. It smells like a much older type of Chypre. This one is also driven by Immortelle, and it is very warm and spicy. It's aldehydic, mossy. There's a lot of myrrh in this. There's a rosiness to it that kind of this kind of is like a very modern take on something like Aromatics Elixir. Not to say it smells like it, but the same kind of sensibility. And it's beautiful. And the perfumer is Ralph Schweiger. It's my favorite creation by him. Some people dislike it because of the very reason that it is much more of a classical kind of approach to a perfume. But I think it's spectacular. And the last one, which is probably one of the most unusual fragrances of the 21st century, and this is Nuit de Bacali. And this is from
What's here? Yeah.
Naomi Goodser. Thank you. I'm like drawing a blank. So much information overload. This nominally is a tuberose fragrance, but I don't pick. It is in here. Tuberose. It does play a role, but is it? This is the kind of green for the ultimate green lover. It's kind of like, you know how like you say like Friends is bitter and sour, and not everybody can get into that, but if you can get into that, you really love things like that. This is the same thing. It's very bitter, very stemmy, very like natural green,
Wow,
leafy,
really?
like the plant. Oh my god, it is like the ultimate, like it's crazy. And it's also musky too. It's very green but also very musky. There's a lot of angelica root, which is actually the root of angelica is a very musky botanical. Um, a lot of galbanum, tomato leaf, carrot seeds. There is mugwort in here, which is in the Artemisia family. So you get a lot of this very punchy and sharp and beautiful stuff in here, but it's not for the faint of heart. It's for those who love all of that stuff and would dream to have all of it together. And this was actually Isabelle Doyen, who is the house perfumer for Annick Goutal. She
Gotta
contributed
check.
this.
I gotta check that one out because I had Guadasquez from Naomi.
Ah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
great one.
Great
And I'm
smoky,
a
yeah.
sucker. I think we are on the same wavelength in regards to these these earthy, foresty, outdoorsy, to the
Yeah,
extreme
to the
type
extreme.
of stuff. And I would like to. I will try this one.
Yeah, it's unisex. It is floral, but there is nothing. I will say this, and I think our fellow perfume aficionados who really know what they like, it is not pretty. Don't expect pretty from this. This is like hyper realism to the point where like if you're just sort of like I'm kind of in a I'm in a perfume, and then they smell this and they'll run in the other direction. You have to be somebody who wants to run toward it and then lavish yourself in it. um, but I think it is one of the most incredible pieces of art as far as perfume in the 21st century. So that's my
Wow.
last one, Nuit de Bacali. I also have the Iris one, which I think is very nice. Irisandra, very nice. I have two from this house, but this is the one by far. It's like top 10 of all time.
Wow, I'm gonna check that out for sure.
And there you have it. Those are all mine.
That's cool. So I'm gonna continue the niche line, right? And I'm gonna
Please,
go
please.
the unwearable shocking line as well, which I like as well. With this one, don't I'm sure you actually know this one, and it's
Kinski. Mm-hmm.
yes,
Yeah.
Kinski, Kinski by Gesa Schön, right?
Geza
And
Shin is great. I love
Gesa
Boudicca
Schön
as
has,
well.
and he has this thing for weed, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
my wife hates this fragrance, and so I only wear it when I go to a concert. For example, I went to Pantera 2 weeks ago,
Oh, that'd be perfect
or
for that.
Fun Loving Criminals or something,
Yeah.
and I put this on, and it's where it should be. So I love Kinski because it has this uncompromised herbal, woody weed smell with a bit of aquatic touches in it,
Hmm.
and that makes it come across kind of weird, but if it's the right occasion, it's still something that is actually fun to wear.
Yeah.
Probably more for the wearer if it fits the personality and the aura of the person. It has been discontinued. Kinski, of course, is the late great genius and weirdo Klaus Kinski, the
Yes.
the German actor, the Polish German actor,
Right.
who I actually loved in all the Werner Herzog films, especially Fitzcarraldo and Wojciech. He was a very controversial person. Obviously, that's what I said. He was a weirdo because he because he was, and but a genius actor. And this has been brought out in 2011 to celebrate the 20th anniversary of his passing because he died in 91. So I love this. I have a backup bottle as well, and but it's I rarely use it, but it's still this is one of those fragrances that's just gotta have,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
get nervous that I don't have it because it's somehow such a no bullshit when you it's like meeting a person that is finally no bad intentions, no bullshit. You can sit down and have a nice talk over hours and hours out without having to think about, so what is he looking or she looking for to gain out of this? No, this is a no bullshit, no nonsense fragrance, which I totally love. And my last one is an interesting release, because you could name this or call this a ripoff of a famous Hollywood star, and it probably is. Um, it's
Ah.
by the Steve McQueen line, released in 2012, I think, and that's the Mythic one. It
Mm.
had it featured three or four fragrances.
Hmm.
Obviously, his son, who has died since, Chad McQueen, has authorized this, so it's an official Steve McQueen fragrance. The thing is that I know from sources that actually Steve McQueen hated fragrances, never wore a fragrance in his
Oh,
life,
really?
and called it box spray, the fragrances that were around. So it's a bit controversial, right?
Yeah,
But why
yeah.
do I love this fragrance? Um, it's the weirdest combination of two notes or two main players here, um, red berries and pine, and they come
Mm.
together on the patchouli base.
Yep.
It sounds weird, but red berries and pine in this fragrance is just something that is so unexpected. You can call it even a bit synthetic, but what is not synthetic these days
You're
anyway?
right, right, right.
But
That shouldn't be a discouraging thing at all. Like it
this,
can.
I just love this. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a backup bottle of this, and I just, again, for these type of more rugged occasions, right? Great performance and eau de parfum. Nobody knows this. Nobody wears this. I love Steve McQueen. His movies, um, and um, and so I really love this fragrance because I love pine, and pine with red berries is so unexpected. Then I would like to bathe in this, but yeah, I rather don't, because then it's I use it up, and I wouldn't like to have that scenario going on. So absolute beauty here, to close the lineup.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I have that. I've mentioned this before. The dent anxiety, where you're starting to see the depletion of it, and you know that it's going to be hard to, or if not impossible, to get more. And it's just you want to just relish it and not overuse it and hold on
Yeah,
to it for as long as you can. That attachment. And yeah, the fun, that yes, the drop in the big hitters. I think we both are in our own right. We're bringing them to the table here. It's wearing a green tuberose wrapped in roots with leather. He's referring to Nuita Bakali and Lee Schweiger. Yep, he was the perfumer.
oh yeah,
Uh, and Magnetism and CK Crave are my fave. And Oracera says, I like the smells of these ones you're talking about, but I don't want to wear them. They overwhelm me. Proof positive, they're not for everyone. And that's fine. Like I think that both of us here are mature gentlemen, and we know that not everybody can, not everybody has a taste for certain things, and that doesn't mean that they can't appreciate them. I think it's good to be able to make that distinction. And yeah, you have to, it has to it has to tickle those receptors in your brain that make you feel good. And if it's not making you feel good, don't subject yourself to it. By the way, Orisaurus, I am putting together your 4 bottle grab bag and sample pack. I should get that out to you by next week. I'll reach out to you soon regarding that. UK says, JJ, Chris, what can you say about crazy and mind-blowing Filippo Sorcinelli scents? Um, I have one, Unum Labs, which I think is a very well done incense, very dark, very brooding. Um, it definitely lends an atmosphere. I think that as a whole for his work, and I will be brutally honest, and I do have a tendency, he is very hit or miss. So sometimes I think that he does a great job and it's put together in a cohesive way. Other times, it just misses the mark for me. So the bottles can sometimes look very cool. Other times they can look like boogers that are stuck to glass. I don't really understand the aesthetic half the time, but half the time I think, So he's hit or miss for me, to be honest. Are you familiar with Filippo Sorcinelli?
not necessarily, because I in regards to niche, with I'm a father of two, twice divorced, thirdly happily married, and so I got to think about how much I deep dive into the cost factor of this hobby. But also I'm a believer in, and that just yesterday, my wife went into a drugstore and brought home a soap by a local drugstore or German drugstore brand. Their own brand is Rossmann, which we have over here in Budapest as well. And it's called, I don't know, sea or ocean or whatever. And I kept smelling it like a little kid. Oh, this smells awesome. So a good smell is not necessarily linked to high expense. So when
Yes.
I'm searching, my priority goes into the directions which are the best price versus quality ratio, which rarely happens with niche, because I got burned a few times with niche, paying a lot of money and getting not necessarily what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And so this is why I deep dive more into the other direction and leave niche in the background. But I'm never closed down. You could see I have niche in the lineup, although not much, like Fougère Bengale and Kinski, for example, in this lineup. So I have plenty of niche, but I need to deep dive further in order to be able to give you a credible, genuine, and comprehensive answer to that very good question in regards to Sorcinelli, especially since he's Italian and I have this Italian flank. So I will probably look into it and then see if my opinion matches yours.
Yeah, it could very well be different, or it could be similar. Um, Being that I now have this reputation as a perfume critic, um, it's important for me to draw the line between having an appreciation and my own personal taste and opinion towards something, and then also being able to identify if it really is in fact a perfume that, based on my experience, my nose, my background, what I expect from how a perfume is put together, if it has been put together in a way that seems to be competently executed. And sometimes I don't think that certain perfumers are consistent with that. Their output might be too abundant. You know what I mean? Like Chris, you've seen like some houses, like these niche houses, and they release like 20 in a year, and it's how much time do they really dedicate to each one of those so that you have a very well deliberated product. And the thing that I have, my reservations with people like Sorcinelli, who obviously is like a very expressive artist, and I really respect that. I I just sometimes I think it would be better if they slowed down with the releases and just put much more energy into the actual fragrances than in the concept and theme and story and narrative surrounding each and every one of them. So that's my take.
Question here, since you've mentioned Marc Antoine Corticchiato,
Hmm.
um, and we have had, I think he was behind Fougère Bengale. Am I right?
Indeed, yeah, the whole house, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, and here's my question, and actually I don't know if you experienced this, but I had a bad experience with him, for example,
Hmm.
meaning that I love Fougère Bengal, and then I went to another niche house that I really like, Frappin, right?
Okay.
And Frappin has this fragrance called Speakeasy, which
Yes. Yep.
sort of appeals to me. So I got my hands on a sample and I started to use it. And there's this boozy theme going on, but the dry down seemed
Hmm.
to me very, very, very close to Fougère Bengal. And I was scratching my head. Is it me or what? Or was Marc Antoine Cotegiato working along the same lines in the base and just putting other different stuff? But I was gobsmacked to smell a very similar dry down to this and Speakeasy. Do you think that can be, or is it? Do I get my nose fixed?
Mm-mm. No, I think it is more than plausible. I think that perfumers, they make many different drafts. It almost like they have certain bases and accords that are modular, meaning they can lift
Mhm.
one from one composition and then experiment with a different composition.
Ah, okay.
So it should come as no surprise, especially if you're talking about the same perfumer, that happens. As a matter of fact, a lot of perfumers will sell their drafts,
Oh yeah.
and they will sell them to certain perfume houses that have already just been sitting around, and they haven't been used for a brief. They decided not to use it for their own house. They send them, a sample of it. Hey, what do you think of this? Would you like to have this for your house? Would you like to build a concept around it? So on and so forth. Perfumers are doing this all of the time.
I
So
think along those lines, I heard once that interestingly, Dior's Poison and Alain Delon's Iquitos are related in that sense that there was
yeah.
this base that went into a direction and one was rejected and one was not, and then it somehow shares a similar. Actually, the punch of those two fragrances is very similar.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that fascinating that the sensibility of the both of them are similar, even though they were two different perfumers presenting
Yeah,
their proposal for a brief, and Poison, the what we know as Poison, was the one chosen. And then I love this because it's a mind fuck for those who think, well, feminine and masculine.
yeah,
They were, what this is. We'll just make this a masculine, and that's
voila.
happened so much. It's happened so much. It just goes to show you that there's very little in the way of quote unquote gender differences in fragrance. If you have to draw sort of like a diagram with like a bell curve, and really honestly, the bell curve, most of it in between is of fragrance is unisex, and then you'll have like a little sliver on one side that is much more culturally masculine, and then on the other side a little sliver that's much more culturally feminine. But in that bell curve, the great majority is just unisex. It's just depending upon, I mean, you look at things like in the mid, there's some like really good examples like that, like Canoe was originally women's, went to men's. Old Spice, originally women's, went to
Wow.
men's. You name it, there's so many of them. There are fragrances that nobody would bat an eye, or I don't know how you would say that smell wise, bat a nostril when you would smell uh Bandit from Robert Piguet. Like how on earth is that a female fragrance? Well, it was a female fragrance. Azure from Estee Lauder, female fragrance, but
Yeah,
it could have Azure is actually Bernard Shaw, and this goes back to what I was just talking about a little while ago, Chris. It was an modular. He took Aramis, the certain accords or bases that he used for Aramis, lifted them, added some things, removed some things. Azure. Perfumers were doing all Rudnitska. Look at what Rudnitska would
yeah,
do that
yeah,
with between diorama and then diorling and then diorescence and diorella and so on and so forth. And that's what also results in what people call the DNA.
yeah.
That's what the DNA is. Yeah, very cool
Very
stuff.
interesting. Very good. Very good. Very informative.
Pink used to be a masculine color, exactly. It still is in certain cultures because of its
Exactly. Yeah, Elvis.
association with red.
Nobody. Yeah, yeah. Nobody had an issue with Elvis driving a. It was the most natural thing. Elvis driving a pink Cadillac. What was the problem? You know.
Right, right, right. Color has it's only what we impart onto things culturally and socially that give things gender. And I know this is an age where there's a lot of debate on what gender is and what sex is. And I don't want any viewers to conflate between that. That's a whole other story. We're just talking about things like art and perfume and things that anybody should be able to enjoy and not feel like they're not expressing their gender the way they should, because it's not, these are things that are external, you know and anybody should feel comfortable enjoying whatever they want without other people
Absolutely.
not minding their own business and saying, well, isn't that feminine? Well,
Yeah.
bugger
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. But it helps the marketing. Helps the sale. Probably. That's the thing. I mean, the sales and the
Exactly. It's
marketing. Yeah.
all. Yep. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It's just business. It's
Yeah.
just a way of making business. And there's it's what's the word I'm trying to use? It's shrewd. It's a shrewd way of selling products, but it's just like like personal care products. Like if a guy really uses something that is supposed to be formulated for a woman, like most of the time, maybe save for like a small percentage of products, when it comes down to the ingredients, they're not really any different. It's
Yeah.
just people like to have something that makes them feel like a man or a woman, even though the products themselves,
Right.
there's nothing inherently gendered about them. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and the business is like what I've heard, that Liz Taylor made much more money on her fragrances with than she ever earned in the film studio making her movies. So
Yes, it's true. It's crazy, the business of perfume, and there's so much controversy over the decades. Hey, circling back to the whole theme, right? The decades, over the decades in perfume, where there are so many things behind the scenes that we would just be shocked.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Do you plan ever releasing your own fragrance? Do you have that in mind?
my own celebrity fragrance.
No, but
No, I know. I'm just
you
joking.
got all these
No,
people coming out
yeah,
and some of them are good, some of them are not, but like why not? If you establish your name in this, I remember you remember the two of my fragrance reviewers heroes were one was um, Betavi Blood. What is his name? What's his name?
oh god.
He came from Indonesia, and he was doing this crazy good fragrance reviews, and the other one was Kerosene from the US, right? And
And he started his own.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think
Hmm.
he's successful because he's having
Yeah.
Christo Maves was the other guy. Christo Maves with Betavi Blood. That was his channel. Great review. I loved the guy. But that would
Yeah.
be talking about 15 years ago.
Right. That was the fragrance YouTube ages ago. I remember I first started watching fragrance YouTube maybe in 2008 or 9, when
Yeah,
there were very few channels, and Katie Puckrick was one of them as well, and I remember Christo was one of the first ones I ran into a
Christo.
long
Yeah,
time. Yeah, yeah, he's a great guy. And we've seen the evolution of these YouTubers as well, where they started off in a very different ecosystem, I guess you could say. And now, when everything is so algorithm driven, it changes the way that people create content. And often, what they do is they shed themselves of all those things that are not going to make them money. Like if money is the first thing that they have in mind, then they're going to jettison anything that is going to slow down um, their income. So that
yeah.
means taking away a lot of those things that were more authentic, honestly,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. It's better do five one-arm push-ups than explain about the breakdown of notes.
right, or talk at great length, about how it performs and how you macerate it. That's the thing that's driving me crazy now. The maceration thing, like
Yeah,
these things happen. They happen virally. They come out of that. Like, who starts this? Where people honestly think that a product is being made with the expectation that the person is not going to be using the product for like a month, to just sit there. Like, it's this is the result of the democratization of thought and opinion on the internet. It's like back when we were younger, in like the 90s and even 2000s, maybe, yeah, 2000, because we didn't have social media as much. You didn't hear about all these, you didn't hear about all these village idiots from millions of different villages around the world. You just knew of the one nearby. And now we have the great privilege of hearing people who are not that bright espousing things that make no sense or are baseless or just absolute misinformation ad nauseum from thousands of different people, and it becomes viral.
yeah. Freedom of speech. Hallelujah.
A hallelujah to freedom of speech. Free- There's one more question, Chris. And you did actually mention this earlier. If you lived in Dublin for a while, and that is in fact true, right?
Yeah, I lived and worked in Dublin between 2004 and 2008. Yes, I had a wonderful time. I love Dublin. I love the Irish, and it's a great city. Uh, but I was more like a single man at the time, so I wouldn't necessarily live there with family because it's extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very nice. It's a very nice country as well. Nice around Dublin and to the west as well, towards Galway and Westport and Achill Island. It's a great country.
Yeah, yeah. My father's his father is from Ireland. Yeah, actually from from Dublin. Yeah, I'm like drawing a blank here. Yeah.
There you go.
So I have some Irish background. I'm seeing here, folks, that we have 27 people tuned in. We have 35 likes. Before we sign off here, let's try to get that up to 40 likes before we sign off. So that means only about 5 more likes.
Come
Some of
on,
you,
folks.
some of you 28 people there may have not have liked the stream yet, and just do me a favor, do us a favor. We want people to see this great discussion that we've been having, to find this channel, find this video. Nick S says, I sort of miss how hard things were to research in the early 90s before the internet really took off. I loved the effort. I loved like the challenge of it, like going to like a library and looking at like microfilm and microfiche of like old magazines and newspapers, going through the stacks and having to look through books to find information. There was sort of like this exciting kind of like adventure to it. Um, Old is gold. Yep, I'll agree with you there.
And it sticks to me. We were talking about music. It sticks to music as well. I mean, these
Yeah,
days you have Spotify and all these things, Apple Music. You listen one song, next song, next song. In the old days, you had to wait. You knew that the album is coming out, and then you had the
yeah,
album. You had to wait for it. Then you had the album cover. That was a piece of art, if it was. But for example, I liked Genesis at the time, and they always had some new creative album, not just a photo of themselves, but something that was part of this whole art package that the music was all about. And then the A side, B side, it looks, it actually, it sounds stupid at this, and it sounds, I don't know, dated probably, or I don't know, but it had a charm to
yeah.
to wait and make have the time input and the energy input, and what was mentioned here, that yeah, it had more personality, more content, and less of a
Yeah.
rush, and probably a money making aspect. But that's true for fragrances as well, like you know
It is true. You know, it is. And then we're in an attention economy as well. So our attention is being splintered. What I'm finding is there is this exhaustion when I'm listening to Spotify, because you have all of these options and things are coming out in real time, and like you said, you don't have that process, that anticipation, that effort that needs to be put into being patient and waiting and then acquiring it, and it's almost like a ritual. It's like the
yeah,
lack of ritual in listening to music. And it also affects like pop music radio as well, because nowadays, instead of waiting for one pop single to run its course, these albums, they don't even have singles really. They're just all put to the radio, and they're
yeah,
all climbing the charts, and they're all sitting around forever, climbing and sitting in the same space. And there's not that. It almost was like a very a rhythm to new releases, new singles.
yeah.
Having the physical artifact was a big part of it as well. And when I listen to Spotify, I get exhausted. It's like I miss being able to just be deliberate and present with an album, and just
At times
not
it's like in the book. No, it's the same thing.
with, yeah,
uh
yeah,
um, yeah. So yeah, well, and you have less and less bands and people who actually play uh instruments physically. They cable, because there's so much of this bubblegum music going on that the real artist, I don't know, I'm still don't I still don't see the next Freddie Mercury or James Hetfield or Robert
yeah.
Palmer or
Mm-hmm.
Phil Collins or anybody who is able to actually physically play an instrument and write music on a level that is actually, there is, and nothing against Taylor Swift, okay? It's nothing against her
No,
personally,
it's
but
okay to have an opinion on Taylor Swift. You're in good
uh,
company.
the thing is that, help somebody, I'm still asking people, help me understand how, because I've seen and I've been told in the media that she is at this point the best-selling artist ever, and I cannot name a single song from her. I don't know. Maybe I know, maybe I heard it, but I don't
You've
know
heard
that
them,
it's
but they
her.
don't stick. They
Yeah,
don't, you
they don't.
don't you don't want to remember them.
Yeah. So
uh,
I don't, or we just getting old. Probably that's the thing. So
it
we
could be
have
that
something
too.
like this hanging here at home. The signed Guns N' Roses stuff
Yeah.
from my wife. She loves that. And
I
so
was I was thinking of this too. Like, are we ever going to have these kind of musicians like Prince or Nile Rodgers, or these multi instrumentalists, multi talented? Like, they can sing, they can write their songs, they can play multiple instruments, they can experiment with different themes, and like everything just seems to be derivative and rehashed and hermetically sealed and overly processed, overly produced. I mean, we don't even fucking have like chord changes in pop songs anymore. There's not even like that chord change. The chord change when you just get like that dopamine release when it's the chord changes. I don't even really hear that much anymore.
no, no,
Yeah.
and I remember the Status Quo joking about it back in the 80s, that they had this thing going on. They wrote all these world hits, and they said to him, well, you guys are the three chord band, right? And then Francis Rossi said, well, it's actually two chords that, that that we do, but still, yeah, they had this da 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 da, and somewhere some, yeah, in this way actually music sticks better. This yeah, but maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know. I think our parents said the same thing when the Beatles were coming around, or when the Rolling Stones, when Mick Jagger was jumping around the stage, or the Sex Pistols, or
Yeah.
I don't know, or
they
George Michael. I don't know. It's
the, and they were thinking, what is the world coming to?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
some
yeah.
of those, like, really, those people who the in the silent generation were seeing that, people like George Michael or Boy George, and thinking, what is happening to manhood these
Yeah,
days,
exactly.
like that kind of crap. So it's just part of, I guess, generational change. But I think that it's part of aging, and it's part, and but it won't change my opinion of it. I'll still think that it stinks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I have a question from Supply and Demand. JJ, I love Effluvium, but when are you going to start to release more recorded theme videos? I've touched on this in the past. I am a very busy person. I can't do a lot of content. I'm just grateful to be able to do Effluvium with friends like Chris and the great guests that I've had. But I have to, pick what I want to do at a given time. So I'll tell you why I'm not doing the recorded theme videos right now. They will return. They are much more time intensive to make them halfway decent, and even then, like, I feel like they're kind of like a little low budget for my liking. And it involves a lot more. It's just much more preparation. I will do them again in the future. They will be less frequent. I'm taking a break on them because I just want to finish this season of Effluvium before I move that elsewhere. But I have, with my full-time job, it's very demanding. I'm not going to get into too much detail on my private aspect of my job, but it demands a lot from me. So juggling between a full-time job, spending time with my partner, and doing social media stuff, you can imagine what the hierarchy is with that. So I can't really do a lot of content like some people can do. But that's not to say I won't do original videos. They're just, it's gonna, I probably won't do another one until maybe the summer. So I know, I'm sorry. It's just, that's my life. I can't be a big content creator. But you'll see things in the future. Um, and you know what? It will be on. I'll be doing floral videos once I actually do some videos. I'm planning on doing one on carnation and rose, and I'll be doing some videos on some other things that I haven't done videos on before. But yeah, I when I first started this channel, I was hoping to do like videos once a week, and I realized very quickly that with my life, it just wasn't happening. So, Nathaniel Moody, great to have you here. Missing the ritual of listening to music, popping in a CD in my Discman, zooming around Boston, looking at the liner notes, or like as far back as when, vinyl, like looking at the, opening the gatefold sleeve and reading the lyrics. Jaunty John says, do you guys know some fragrances that give you similar vibes to Oscar de la Renta pour Louis? What do you think, Chris?
I think I get some similar vibes to G-Man from
Okay.
Oscar de la Renta because
Yep.
it shares a soapiness. Probably Oscar de la Renta is even more a little bit more complex. Um,
Oh yeah.
Although it's not, it's a bit of a shadow of its former self. But
Mm-hmm.
we know that Oscar de la Renta, the gentleman of fashion, right? He created that fragrance for himself,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's very high level stuff, and I really like it. Um, but apart from G-Man, nothing comes really to my mind that has a sense. Why don't you stick to Oscar de la Renta, Pogluida then?
Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, the only other ones I can think of that are somewhat similar. I mean, you got to think about Port Louis was launched around the same time as Antaeus. The two aren't exactly the same, but they were released at a time where that general theme was popular. So my advice to you is just tread with caution. Don't overdo it because I've done this. I bought so many different fragrances that were from the same genre, and then I realized, like, do I really need to have all the like? Just stick with the one or two that most satisfy you, and yeah, I don't know. I can't think like Van Gill's probably, is kind of similar to that. But yeah, just enjoy your Oscar de la Renta Port Louis. That is a good advice from Chris there. Bren, sadly, chaps, Ireland is no longer what it once was. Just saying, great stream, really enjoyed it. Oh, I'm very sorry, Bren, for upon hearing that. But I'm so glad that you were able to tune in. Do you know Thundercat,
No.
Chris? Who is Thundercat? Can you enlighten us? Prince was a genius for sure, an eccentric genius, and I like my eccentric people. Some people have criticized his eccentricity. I think that's what made him even more fascinating. UK says, I love Björk. That's not Bjork for Americans who love to say Bjork, rhyming with pork. It's Björk. That's how you pronounce that O with an umlaut on the top. Thundercat. And I matched on a dating app once when he was in town for a show. Now I really want to know who this Thundercat is. Good taste on this stream. Prince and Björk are my two favorites. Chaperon does a key change. You're right. There is an exception. Yes, on that one song. Yeah. That's why I do sort of appreciate Chaperone to a degree. I think Chaperone and Sabrina Carpenter are bringing a renaissance to pop music with a little bit more diversion in the composition. So I will give credit to some pop singers. I mean, there's still a lot of garbage out there, though.
I will need to leave shortly.
Okay, why don't we do this? Because we're already running over 2 hours, anyways. We're going to wrap things up here. Chris, stick around just for backstage for just a couple minutes so we can do some
That's great.
wrap up. What I'm going to do here is turn on this, which is the theme music. We'll go through the last of these comments here. And Levi says, I wish I caught more of the stream. Good to see the stream. Tune into the playback, the archive. I love the Pink Panther icon here. Have a good night. Thundercat is one of the best players right now.
Wow. I wish I knew him.
I need Violet in every iris there. Drop me a note. We'll talk more about that. I think I should do another themed stream on that.
And I have to say, really, that it was educational to me as well, this one, because, lots of good information.
Thank you. I'm humbled by that because you're one of the people who inspired me to do any kind of content creation. So once again, it was a pleasure, Chris. Join me when I do my Substack podcast when I'm over there. We'll chat more there.
Let me know. Yeah, definitely.
And stick around backstage. I'm going to sign off. Everybody take care. I will see
Thank
you
you
all
very
again
much.
soon.